My next life as a villainess, all routes lead to doom. Volume 1. Chapter 4, The Outcome of a Thrown Gauntlet. A few weeks after the fields had been so magnificently resurrected, we entered the height of summer. At long last, news of Mary and Prince Alan's formal engagement reached the Clays Manor as well. Having invited Mary over to the manor today, I promptly decided to ask her the question myself. I heard about your engagement announcement, Mary. Congratulations. Yes, thank you very much. I have been formally engaged to the prince. Like you, Lady Katarina, I am very much pleased. While Mary did seem somewhat happy, I couldn't help but notice that she was not exactly pleased at the engagement itself. Ahem. Have you met with the prince yet, Mary? Yes, I have indeed met him. Well? How was it? How was what, Lady Katarina? Well, you know. What was he like? And all that. For the record, I was guilty at having unintentionally used one of the prince's famous lines. Would Alan be able to adequately charm Mary without that line of his? He is a most handsome person. He praised my garden as well, Lady Katarina, much like how you had done. Oh. And then? Yes, this was all correct, scenario-wise. The second half of Mary's response caught my attention, however. And then? What do you mean, Lady Katarina? What happened after he showered praise on your garden? Well, that was all there was to it. Mary replied, tilting her head slightly in apparent confusion. What? That's all there was to it? Well, what about that famous line? Did he not say it? Ahem. Did he say anything about your green hands, thumb? Green thumb, ah. Have you heard about it, Lady Katarina? I mean, he did say something like that, right? He did. Right. Mary, who was now positively blushing, seemed to offer up a token resistance as I continued questioning her, before eventually giving in. My, how embarrassing to think that you would hear of the affair yourself, Lady Katarina. Yes, as I expected, he did say wait. What do you mean by affair? Ah. Well, it is as you may have heard, Lady Katarina. I told Prince Alan about how you had praised me, saying that I had a green thumb. You said it to him. And you told him I said it to you. Yes, well. I was really happy that you would praise me my hands in such a way, Lady Katarina, so happy I was, that I had to tell Prince Alan about it too. Mary said, her voice becoming gradually softer as the crimson hue on her face deepened. So how should I summarize this? Before Alan could even claim that Mary was a special girl with a green thumb, I said it to her. Not only that, Mary went on to tell Alan that Lady Katarina mentioned that I had special hands, a green thumb, yes. Faced with such a spectacle, there was no way Alan could say his line. After all, I said it first, or at least, a variant of it. Prince Alan. I am truly sorry. After my continued interrogation, Mary claimed that she was fond of the prince, but it was plain to anyone present that she didn't really feel that way. Prince Alan. I am deeply sorry. Well, in any case, they're engaged to each other, so I'm sure she'll learn all about the prince's charms from here on out. Work hard, Prince Alan, I thought, my eyes glazing over as I continued my internal monologue. Mary, apparently worried about my faraway gaze, even asked if I was hungry. You really are the very image of a noble lady, Mary. Although it was unintentional, I had somehow gotten between the two of them. This would not do. If anything, the two should live happily ever after. As much as I hoped it were possible, I didn't think I had the capability to bring the two together. All I could do was cheer for them from the depths of my heart. The incident happened a few weeks after my conversation with Mary. Harvest season was also nearing its end. Now was a good time for the vegetables to be harvested and eaten. Young miss. The prince is here, saying that he requires your presence. Anne said, a notable tone of panic in her voice. What is it, Anne? Prince Jedward always marches in here on his own volition either way. While I had made an effort to formally receive Prince Jedward on his visits, the prince himself eventually claimed that he needed no formal welcome after the frequency of his visits increased. Nowadays, the prince showed up every 3 days or so, and would often just walk into the gardens where I was working in my overalls. He was, of course, used to my overalls and gardening gear, and as such, there was no real reason for me to change into any finery. Basically, the prince visiting me was nothing out of the ordinary, and hardly a reason for panic. No, it isn't that, young miss. Your visitor is not Prince Jedward. What's Anne going on about? Unless there's a social party of sorts, the only prince that frequents the manor's grounds is Jedward, I thought, giving one of the cucumbers I had cultivated a good pull. It isn't Prince Jedward, young miss. It's Prince Alan, fourth in line to the throne. I responded, stunned. The cucumber that I had held moments ago slid out of my gloved hands, falling onto the ground. Why? I do not know the reason, young miss. In any case, you really should meet with him. For some reason, I feel like this is the beginning of yet another troublesome incident. After dashing back into the manor at full speed, I promptly got dressed with Anne's assistance, and soon headed off to the guest parlor. I hurried all the way to the parlor's doors, then I threw them open. I found within a somewhat haughty youth, standing with his back to me. You're late, the prince said, turning his head to glance at me without offering any semblance of a greeting or introduction. What an arrogant young man! Before I knew it, my cheeks started puffing out. First he suddenly marches into my house, and now this? I had a good mind to lose my temper, but he was, after all, an 8-year-old boy. I, however, am an adult. Of 17 or 19 years of age. I reminded myself of that fact as I offered the prince a formal greeting. I offer my sincere apologies. I was caught up in some other affairs. I am Katerina Clays. Alan Stewart, the prince responded haughtily, in spite of my smile and formal manner of speech. Alan Stewart, a potential love interest and fortune lover, but he sure is one pretty prince. He bore no resemblance to Jedward, his twin, however. While Jedward was much like a fairy tale prince with his blonde hair and blue eyes, Alan had silver hair and eyes of glinting emerald, a more wild and dashing image, if you will. Dashing though he might be, he was still impossibly arrogant, even for a prince. In fact, his behavior reminded me of Katerina Clays herself, at least, before I suddenly regained all of my previous life's memories. Even Jedward, who was a prince in his own right, did not behave in such a manner. While he was twisted in his own way and certainly had questionable thoughts of his own, he was at least calm and humble on the surface. With those thoughts in mind, I continued observing Prince Alan. Katerina Clays. I am here because I have something to say to you today, the haughty prince said, turning a steely gaze towards me. What is it? Honestly speaking, I had no connections whatsoever with Alan thus far. Well, I was engaged to Prince Jetord, and so that would make for some sort of connection. From what I recalled of Fortune Lover's gameplay, however, Alan did his best to avoid his brother at all costs. As such, he should have no special reason to pay me a visit in person. You know Mary Hunt, right? Yes. What about Mary? Mary said that you are close to her. Yes? I suppose we are close friends. Alan's gaze sharpened. What is it with this prince? What is he trying to say? Did you know that Mary Hunt is now my fiancée? Well, yes, I do know of that. So you do know. Stop seducing her, then. Seduce. What? I could feel Alan's gaze digging into me. I swallowed in spite of myself. Wait. What is he even saying? Is this prince right in the head? Me? Seduce Mary? But we're both girls to begin with. Well, yes, Mary is gentle, cute, and I am very fond of her. I want to get along with her from here on out, but at no point in time have I thought of taking Mary as my bride. I don't swing that way. Alan, however, clenched his teeth at my stunned silence. Don't play the fool. Even if I ask her out, she declines. Going all, today I have an appointment with Lady Katarina. In fact, you are all she talks about when she is with me. Mary may be pure of heart, but you are clearly at fault for seducing her. There's no doubt about it. What is that supposed to mean? I've had enough of these baseless accusations of yours. Alan, who had apparently wanted to pick a fight with me from the very start, had succeeded in riling me up. I started shouting, despite of my station. What baseless accusations? This is the truth. With that face of yours, you've corrupted my pure Mary. I see this full of himself prince here has quickly decided that I'm a villainess simply because of this face of mine. If there's one thing he's good at, it's getting people mad. What is wrong with you? There's no such thing. In fact, it's your fault for asking Mary out when she already has plans to visit my manor. To begin with, if you really were charming, no girl would turn down your invitation. You're charmless. Mary keeps talking about me. Well, of course she would. It's because you're boring. I shouted, filled with a righteous rage. I soon regretted my outburst, however. No charm, boring. Alan's expression was now stony. This is bad. I've finally gone and done it. I've said something terrible to the prince. Considering that this all started because I had accidentally used one of his lines, well, what was said could not be taken back. I felt beads of cold sweat flow down my back. Ha! This is the first time I've been ridiculed to my face. Steam seemed to be coming out of Alan's ears. He was positively livid. That just now was. This is what I get for giving in during the heat of the moment. Now I can't take back what I said. Prepare yourself, Katarina Clays. I shall take your train of insults as a thrown gauntlet. Wait. I have thrown no gauntlets whatsoever. I'm not going to challenge anyone to any duels. It was just a slip of the tongue. I challenge you to a duel, Alan said, his nose held high. So, how did we end up like this, again? Anne said, with something between confusion and exasperation on her face. We were now standing in the gardens of the Clays Manor. To be specific, we were standing before two tall trees, conveniently located side by side. Well, Master Alan did so proudly proclaim that I shall let you, the woman, decide on the contents of the challenge, and so I did. Even so. You are the daughter of a duke, young miss. And he is one of the princes of the kingdom. The two of you climbing trees? This is going too far. Well, Anne. I couldn't think of anything else I would do better in, so. But young miss. Master Alan does not climb trees. Did you not see how he froze when he heard your suggestion, young miss? But he was the one who accepted the terms, you know. It was as Anne said. Alan had frozen up the very moment the words tree climbing had left my lips. In fact, his expression was akin to that of a gape, and there the prince stood, unmoving for approximately 10 seconds. Out of concern, I had asked after the prince. Are you perhaps unable to climb trees, Prince Alan? His response, however, was curt nonsense. I accept your challenge. And with that, he finally snapped out of his previously frozen pose. This was how both Prince Alan and I had ended up standing before a pair of tall trees in the gardens of the Clays Manor. On another note, my ever-wise and gentle adoptive brother, Keith, was currently keeping Mother busy also that she would not notice this spectacle. The rules of the challenge were simple: the first to reach the top wins. Although he had stood gaping at the tree for a good while, he eventually rolled up his sleeves, as if steeling his resolve. If anything, the prince's entourage seemed to be in more of a panic. The servants pleaded things like, "Oh, my prince, it is most dangerous, and please, please stop this at once." I, on the other hand, had changed into an outfit with pants. In other words, I was fully prepared. Well then, Prince Alan. Are you ready? Yeah. Right. Anytime. Well then. We shall begin on the count of 3. Anne, my personal maid, shall do the honors. Why yet? And so it came to be that I managed to drag a reluctant Anne into my so-called challenge. With her count, the bout began and then promptly ended with my overwhelming victory. To begin with, I climbed trees very often, and was already all the way at the top in a matter of minutes. Alan, however, come to think of it, has Alan ever climbed trees in his life? While I had finished my ascent, he was still stuck on the lowest branch of the tree in question. With this, the challenge ended in my complete, utter victory. Prince Alan. We have a clear victor in this contest. Could we draw this to a close? I called down to him. Humph, don't think you can defeat me, the wild monkey of the back hills, little boy. Have you even climbed a tree before? I turned to Alan with a victorious smile. Alan, however, stared at me once more, visibly unwilling to accept defeat. One more time. I challenge you again. This is the first time I've climbed a tree. I was simply not used to it. Ah, there it is. So the prince himself admits that he has never climbed a tree before. Maybe you should have said so from the very beginning, you show off. That is quite all right. But don't think you can win so easily, prince. Bring it on. Alan would go on to challenge me again and again. The result hardly changed, though. This was perhaps to be expected. Eventually. I'll win next time. Just you watch. Alan said, spouting lines typical of a defeated rival character. Threatening to show up for another challenge sometime in the future, Alan and his entourage finally left the grounds. While I didn't know it at the time, I would continue entertaining Alan's challenges over and over again in the near future. Prince Alan showed up again the very next day, shouting about yet another challenge. I, of course, defeated him easily. The prince would show up again from time to time, challenging me to yet another match. He would then be defeated, and for a while these silly days repeated themselves. As the days passed, we ended up striking up an odd friendship of our own, and it became somewhat customary for Alan and me to have some tea after the inevitable challenges. As of late, the prince seemed a little happier despite his long history of losses. Perhaps I was just imagining things. With this, I thought that the crisis between the prince and me was over, but then eventually, the day came. "Jedward, what are you doing here?" It was bound to happen over time. Jedward and Alan had run into each other on the grounds of the Clay's Manor. Jedward showed up every 3 days or so, sometimes a little more. Alan, on the other hand, visited once a week. With such timings, it was inevitable that they would eventually meet. Mary, who visited twice a week, had already introduced herself to Jedward. Although I had told Jedward in passing about the contests between Alan and me, I did not mention to Alan that his twin visited every 3 days. While my engagement to Prince Jedward was public knowledge, I also knew of the open hostility which Alan displayed whenever the conversation shifted to his brother. As such, I had hesitated to speak to him in detail about Jedward's visits. This was how the two twin brothers, who hardly ever spoke to one another, both met on the Clay's Manor's grounds. "You sound as if me being here is a most mysterious thing." "This is the home of my fiancé. My presence here is hardly out of place," Jedward said, regarding his twin brother with a smile. "Perhaps that's true. Even so, Jedward's visits seem awfully frequent. Is everyone just this way in this world? In any case, I'm here for a challenge with her today. Don't get in the way." For some reason, Alan seemed to have lost most of his edge. Whatever happened to his unbearably haughty attitude? While Alan was acting somewhat stranger than usual, Jedward seemed to respond in kind. The ever-present smile on his face was a lot more suspicious, perhaps even a little malicious. "About those challenges, I heard that you have failed to achieve victory, time and time again. Would it not be best to simply give up?" While I did have similar thoughts, I would never have said it to Alan in such a blunt way. I looked on somewhat fearfully, afraid that Alan might snap and respond with rage. This was not the case, however. His expression was hardly one of anger, but one of pain. "No. No. We still need to settle it. I can win this. I know I can," Alan shouted, desperation evident in his voice. It seemed like Alan could only see Jedward. A strange atmosphere slowly filled the Clay's Manor. While I was pretty good at ignoring unpleasant developments of all sorts, this was on another level. This was bad. All right then, clearly the solution is to change the subject at hand. I had to clear away this miasma that hung in the air. I had just the thing for it, something that had been on my mind for quite some time. "Ah, Prince Alan. If you would accept, perhaps we could change the terms of the challenge itself? My mother will surely be greatly displeased if we keep climbing trees." To be honest, it was a bit of a miracle that Mother had not noticed up until now, but I didn't intend to push my luck any further. Mother, of course, had long given up on me. If I climbed trees, then so be it. Inviting a prince to do the same, however, Mother's rage would surely be fearsome. Due to the fact that Keith had kept my mother occupied on every single one of Alan's visits, it was perhaps inevitable that she would become suspicious of what exactly I was up to. If I didn't change the contents of the challenge, I might soon find myself in trouble once again. "If you say so then. What will the new challenge be?" At last, Alan was looking my way. The unpleasant atmosphere from just now, too, had slowly started to disperse. Good, good. Even though I was the one who came up with the suggestion, I was not quite sure what to replace the venerable sport of tree climbing with. Honestly speaking, both my magic and academic abilities were average at best, and hence not good candidates for a challenge. There was, of course, the option of me allowing myself to lose to him. Perhaps then would the prince be content. I would be left with a bad taste in my mouth, however. As I continued scratching my head and pondering on a potential replacement, one of Alan's entourage humbly presented a potential solution. "Pardon me, Miss Clays, but would a board game not be safe? No one would be hurt that way." Alan's servant was right. If we really did play a board game, no one would be physically injured, and any differences between the genders would not be relevant. I, however, was notoriously bad at these games. Chess, Othello, whatever it was, if it required thinking, I was bad at it. In this world, chess was apparently the most popular board game, but of course I wasn't a fan of it. While I could play it, I felt somewhat bitter if defeated. Upon seeing my expression of displeasure, Alan's servant provided yet another suggestion. "Ah. Well then, how about a musical contest? A contest of instruments, perhaps? The better performer would win, yes." A refreshing change, if nothing else. In this world, being able to play an instrument was seen as a status symbol amongst nobility. As such, I was made to learn the piano and violin from a young age. In my previous life, I had participated in concerts and the like with my recorder and piano. At the very least, I could still play the piano somewhat reasonably. As for the violin, I was unfortunately not all that suited for it. "I don't mind playing the piano," I responded, somewhat cheerfully. Alan readily agreed. With this, the challenge between Alan and I was no longer that of tree climbing, but a musical competition. It had suddenly taken on an aristocratic air when I wasn't looking. At the very least, I was sure that Mother wouldn't be upset even if she witnessed us competing. The servants were united in relief, with most of the prince's entourage saying something along the lines of, "Ah, what a relief that all this tree climbing business is over and done with." In fact, the servant who had suggested the musical idea was currently being fervently praised by their peers. And so, all of us present headed towards a room with a piano in it, for the purposes of this safe and aristocratic musical bout. The piano in the Clays manor was considerably large, befitting its status as the main piano of a duke's family. It was certainly on a much grander scale than the smaller one I used to play in the school's music room. As it was a musical competition of sorts, the servants of both our families were to be the judges. Jedward, who was also present, was called on to rate our performances as well. With this, the stage was set. I would be first to play, followed by Prince Alan. I sat down on the bench and turned towards the piano. While I could only play Der Walzer in my previous life, I was made to practice from a young age as Katharina. The score sheet was a practice song aimed at beginners and young children. Although I made some minor mistakes here and there, I felt like I played reasonably well. In fact, Jedward was surprised at my performance, or more accurately, at the fact that I could even play the piano at all. Should I take that as a compliment? Next up was Alan, who turned to the piano and promptly started playing. For the sake of fairness, we were both using the same score. Although it was the same song, a definitively different sound flowed through the halls of the manor. Everyone present, me included, collectively held our breaths. Alan's performance was truly splendid. I'd simply assumed that he was a spoiled prince who was full of himself to think that he possessed such amazing talents. At the end of his performance, all the servants present burst into applause, something that didn't happen at the end of my session. Amazing! Prince Alan, that was really amazing! I burst out. While I was pretty tone-deaf when it came to music, I could at least discern between a good performance and an average one. Alan himself, however, didn't seem too impressed. He had a hard expression on his face. It's no big deal. That's not true. You have an amazing talent, Prince Alan. I don't have anything that deserves to be called a talent. The more I praised him, the harder his features became. What's wrong with him? As Katarina said, that was most impressive, Jedward said, praising his twin's performance. But you don't really think that, do you? Alan muttered. His expression was one of pain akin to the one I had seen earlier. Then he shouted, "What is this, pity? I don't need any of this. I know you simply think of me as a failure who is good for nothing." Then, as if running away from one thing or another, he bolted straight out of the room. While I had no idea what was going on, I felt that such a dramatic escape warranted an equally dramatic pursuit. Disregarding the stunned expressions of the gathered servants, I chased after Alan, much like the heroine in a shoujo manga. It would seem that the adage of people running away to familiar places was indeed true. Alan was standing under those very same trees where we had held our contests. He looked up at me slightly as I approached, but the sight of me did not seem to be of any comfort. He soon hung his head once more. "Have you come to laugh at me, too?" Alan said, somewhat suddenly. I had no idea what he meant. What am I to laugh about? Nothing about this was particularly enjoyable or pleasant. You're here to laugh, aren't you? Don't think you're all that just because you can play the piano, something like that, right? Whatever do you mean, Prince Alan? Just because you can play it? That's hardly a just. You have quite a remarkable talent, you know. Having witnessed such an amazing performance, I would have assumed that Alan would at least be a little proud of himself. Modesty is the last thing I expected. Having been exposed to his magnificent playing, I could not help but realize that my own performance was greatly lacking. Compared to Alan's captivating performance, my self-assessment had slipped from acceptable to not very good at all. I don't need your pity, Katarina. I'm not good for anything, after all. I'm just what's left behind after Jedward takes all the glory. While I had assumed Alan was haughty and full of himself, it seemed like he was actually a prince with quite the negative outlook. It's not pity. Prince Alan, why is it that you have so little confidence in yourself? Ha! I've been compared to Jedward ever since I entered this world, see? I've never won against him in any category. I bet Jedward took all the good stuff for himself when we were still in mother's womb. So if you think about it, how can leftover dregs such as I have any kind of confidence? Is that what it is? Come to think of it, Fortune Lover did have such a setting for Alan. Ever since the day he was born, Alan had been constantly compared to Jedward, and yet could never best his twin brother in anything. No matter how hard Alan worked, Jedward would accomplish whatever he sought to do before he did, all the while remaining cool and collected. I suppose simply telling Alan, who has been in such a situation for all his life, to suddenly have confidence in himself and work hard would be somewhat callous. After all, Mary, Alan's cute fiancée, was the one who healed his heart in the events of the game. Alan was by no means unskilled, however. In the setting of Fortune Lover, Alan's grades in the academy were top class. The problem here was hardly Alan's capabilities, but rather Jedward being too much of a savant at everything he did. Even so, Alan's previous performance was really something else, perhaps he had an innate talent for music. If I recalled correctly, Alan did play the violin for the protagonist on several occasions. Yes, if I had to guess, Prince Alan must fare better than Jedward in one-field music. At the very least, he had the talent for it. In other words, personally, I think it is more that each of you have your own particular strengths. Your own fortes. What do you mean? Oh. I accidentally blurted it out. To make things worse, Alan's looking right at me now. Well. I think that Prince Jedward has things that he's suited to and good at, as well as things that he can't really handle well. The same goes for you, Prince Alan. I do believe that you have skills you can be proud of, too. It is just a matter of individual strengths and weaknesses. Quite a long-winded explanation, but one that somehow managed to convey what I had wanted to say. Individual strengths and weaknesses, you say? So are you claiming that even Jedward has something he isn't good at? I've never heard of anything like it, from then till now. I suppose Alan had a point. Prince Jedward, who could seemingly do anything and everything without breaking a sweat, hardly seemed fazed by anything. He was fairly intelligent all around, and his skill at the sword was admirable despite the fact that he spent much of his time visiting me at my manor. In fact, he had recently offered to help with the harvest, and was gathering crops at a much faster pace than I ever could. Surely there was nothing he was bad at, or had difficulties with. Even I had thought the same way, until... Phew. Well, Prince Alan, I suppose I should inform you that Prince Jedward does have a weakness. A bold smile lit up my face. After all, I wasn't making it up. I had noticed it recently, the one thing that Jedward simply could not come to terms with. More accurately, I would say it was a discovery of sorts. True to his image, I had originally thought of Jedward as a picture book perfect prince through and through, with no faults or weaknesses. However, as the days passed and Jedward continued helping me with my harvest, and being given a share, I could not help but notice it. Yes, much like the kind old lady in the neighborhood that most children knew, I had grown close to Jedward, and now I understood. Well, the thing that Prince Jedward absolutely cannot stand is... Alan continued staring at me, frozen in surprise and anticipation. On my face was a most malicious smile. Fitting, perhaps, of a villainess. This had happened a few weeks ago. On that day, Jedward and Mary were visiting the manor, planning to take home some of the crops that I had cultivated. Jedward, Mary, and Keith were kind enough to offer to help with the harvest, and that was when it appeared. It darted this way and that by my legs, and seemed headed for Mary. They could be most unpleasant. Not wanting it to surprise her, I decided to catch it instead. However, it promptly changed course, making a beeline for Jedward, who was watching warily nearby. For the very first time in my life, I saw the usually calm Jedward cowed. Afraid. Disturbed, at the very least. And then I knew perhaps, just maybe, Jedward really did not like what he had just seen. Recollecting the events with that malicious smile still on my face, I spotted Jedward himself. He had come searching for us, I suppose, on account of how long we were taking. The perfect chance. Yes, this was the perfect chance to confirm my theory. Up until now, all we had were assumptions. Now was the time. With those thoughts in mind, I reached into my pocket, grabbing onto the object that I had been carrying around with me, hidden, for the past few days. I pulled Alan behind some trees and shrubbery, and we hid as I waited for the perfect moment, observing Jedward the whole time. As Jedward approached our hiding place, I yanked it out of my pocket, tossing it right before his feet. Oh warg! A strangled cry rose from Jedward's throat at the sight of the sudden object. Gone was the calm and collected expression he usually had. In its place was surprise, confusion, hesitation. Ah, yes. There's no mistaking it now. I giggled, still hidden in the bushes. Hey, hold up, so what exactly was the thing that Jedward isn't good with? What did you toss at him? Alan asked, apparently not entirely convinced. I decided to quickly remedy that, filling Alan in with the sordid details. It was a snake. A snake? Well, more accurately, it's an imitation of one. I can't exactly keep a real snake in my pocket now, can I? I don't think most people put snakes of any kind in their pockets, anyway. Well? Why did you toss it at him then? As I said, Prince Alan, I'm showing you what Prince Jedward has difficulties with. Difficulties you don't mean? Is it snakes? Yes indeed. It was but a suspicion at first, but looking at how he just reacted, I can now say so with certainty. Prince Jedward is afraid of snakes, I declared, impossibly proud of what I had discovered and achieved. Ah, truly, this is an amazing discovery. At long last, we have discovered the singular weakness of the picture-perfect prince. On another note, the snake that I had thrown was a toy, handmade by yours truly with rolled and balled up paper, a tool I had made in my efforts to discover Jedward's true weakness. Of course, it looked nothing like the real thing, but judging from Jedward's reaction alone, it had quite the notable effect. Difficulty with snakes. Snakes, huh? He does look cowed, I'll say, but that wasn't what I was talking about. But snakes? Ah, he really does look intimidated by the thing. Alan, who had been muttering to himself all this time, seemed oblivious to the fact that I was doing a little victory dance next to him. I was exuberant. Elated. I had discovered Jedward's one true weakness. With this, even if I were confronted by a catastrophic bad end, I would have one last trump card. I continued my celebratory dance, unaware of the fact that a deep, dark presence had slowly approached me from behind. Katarina, it would seem like you are in a most delightful mood. I wonder what has brought about this joy. Turning around, I came face to face with Jedward, who was standing with quite the radiant smile on his face. In his hand was none other than the toy snake I had just tossed at him moments ago. Ah, yes. He's smiling so brightly, but for some reason, this smile strikes fear into my heart. Slowly but surely, I became aware of a dark aura rising from his being. Prince Jedward. To think that I was worried about you both, since you had gone off chasing after Alan and did not return. What then, may I ask, is this? Jedward said, holding up the toy snake before my eyes. That is a... I could only stare on helplessly, unable to say a single word in the face of Jedward's tremendously intimidating aura. This is bad. I'd thought to just test out my theory with a little prank, but Jedward is angry. No, he's definitely, positively livid. Actually, I'm sure that he didn't see a thing. How is he so sure that I was the one who threw the toy snake, then? Katarina, did you not turn 9 just this very last month? Yes. 9 years of age, Katarina Clays. The oldest daughter of a duke, and my very own fiancée. One would think that she would hardly throw a toy like this, yes. Ugh. Jedward's already brilliant smile rapidly intensified. This is true fear. What if I were exiled from the kingdom for the crime of assault by projectile snake on His Highness the Third Crown Prince? How could this be? A catastrophic bad end? In a place like this, Come to think of it, Katarina. I have not met with Madame Clays today. Perhaps you would know of her whereabouts. Ah, yes. Mother is having tea with Keith at the moment. Caught unawares by the sudden change of subject, I bluntly and honestly answered Jedward's question. Jedward's smile hardly faltered as he processed my response. I see. Well then, Katarina. I really should greet her myself. After all, I have much to say to her on certain peculiar incidents, such as your tree climbing competitions with Alan, and the fact that you threw this toy at me. What? Is Jedward going to sell me out to Mother, simply because I sent a projectile toy snake in his general direction? As expected of the black-hearted prince. Jedward, an embodiment of true primal fear. As much as I begged and pleaded with Jedward, who was currently now marching straight towards Mother, all he did was smile. A radiant, brilliant smile with an obvious sprinkling of intense distaste. I have angered the black-hearted prince, the one person I should not have crossed. Still wallowing in despair, I barely noticed a faint voice from behind me as I haplessly chased after the still fuming Jedward. Turning around in curiosity, I saw that the source was none other than Alan, who had been forgotten all this time, and he was laughing. He was laughing his heart out, as if a great dam had burst within his being. To be more accurate, he was hugging his stomach and laughing in a positively explosive manner. Damn you, Alan! How could you laugh at the misfortune of others? Though I will concede that this incident is entirely my own doing. For now, however, I could hardly bother with Alan. I needed to chase Jedward down. And so I ran. But it perhaps goes without saying that someone like me could not possibly contain Jedward's rage. And so it came to be that Mother found out about my tree climbing contests with Alan, and my projectile snake tossed at Jedward. I sat through a great many insufferable hours of lectures that day. In retrospect, this incident was more than just a disaster. I also made tremendous gains towards my goals. For starters, I had discovered Jedward's one true weakness. In the event of a catastrophic bad end where he threatens to cut me down with his sword, all I had to do was give a projectile snake a good toss and escape while he was in a panicked state. Truly a perfect, flawless plan. Ah, Katarina Clays! You are such a remarkable strategist. All I had to do was improve on my projectile snakes in the time between this day and my enrollment into the academy. I would make them more lifelike, more convincing, and then make sure to hide one in my pocket at all times. With this, I had come up with a superbly ingenious method of avoiding a catastrophic bad end. On another note, Alan no longer challenged me to any more contests or competitions. Even so, he continued visiting the Clays Manor, and I was surprised to find him speaking normally with Jedward after some time had passed, though I didn't even know when that started happening. Why did things change like this? While I was indeed curious, now was not the time for such considerations. I had to prepare myself adequately for the days ahead. Katarina Clays must take bold steps towards the creation of a realistic projectile snake. All in the name of defeating Prince Jedward, should the need ever arise. I was born as the fourth crown prince in line to the throne, receiving the name of Alan Stewart. My older twin brother, Jedward, is in turn the third crown prince. My constitution was weak for the first few years of my life. In fact, I spent most of my time bedridden. As a result, I feel that my mother, the nursemaids, and my caretakers did a good job of spoiling me. At least, they raised me well. As my body slowly gained strength, I eventually reached a point where I could seriously begin my physical and academic training. From then on, I worked hard to claw back the distance between my brother and I. My hard work earned the praise of all my tutors, and perhaps I got a little ahead of myself. It was when I first attended academic tutoring sessions with my older twin brother, Jedward, that I noticed the differences between us. While I was racking my brains for an answer to a question, Jedward merely had a cool and calm expression on his face, soon solving the problem I was struggling with. Even our lessons at swordplay went the same way. While I rushed at Jedward with all my might, he simply deflected my blows as he would a child's, easily defeating me without breaking a sweat. I was inferior to Jedward, and the distance between us was vast. I had finally realized that. Of course, both my physical and academic tutors told me that Jedward was special, and that it was somewhat natural for me to lose to him. They were comforting me, perhaps, but I soon refused to take any more lessons together with Jedward. I would then distance myself from my brother. I could not stand being compared to him, nor could I even endure being by his side. One day, I overheard a certain conversation. Master Allen is always somewhat lacking in the things he does, no. I don't think he chose to be this way. Didn't he live the first few years of his life bedridden? Ah, yes, and having that Jedward as a twin brother, the poor thing. Maybe all the good bits were taken by Master Jedward when they were still in their mother's womb. Haha, so you're saying he only got the dregs and leftovers? Hey, now, that's a little too much, isn't it? The servants spoke with one another, laughing as they strolled through the royal castle's hallways. It was like as if my field of vision slowly turned dark. I could not even muster up any rage at the transgressions that had just taken place before me. The words pierced my heart. In particular, the statement of maybe all the good bits were taken by Master Jedward. Like an immovable thorn it remained, resolutely resisting all my attempts to remove it. Once I had heard that statement, it was as if those same words were whispered by everyone around me, my tutors for swordplay, academic studies. And even the servants seemed to repeat this phrase endlessly. It didn't matter how hard or how much I tried, Jedward would simply tower over me with that cool and collected face of his. I don't remember when exactly it started, but eventually I was filled with nothing but a sense of being inferior to my brother. However, no matter my attempts to best him, and no matter how conscious of his achievements I was, Jedward was simply not interested. To be precise, I was not even reflected in his eyes. This made me suffer, and made me harbor a deep resentment towards him, and yet, the more distance I put between myself and my brother, the more I resented him, and the more it hurt inside. It was in the spring of my 8th birthday that I heard of Jedward's engagement plans. The castle was filled with gossip of it. He had apparently decided to take the oldest daughter of a powerful duke as his future bride. A few months after that, my engagement plans were finalized as well. Unlike Jedward, I had not asked for her hand in person. Given that I was the last prince in line to the throne without a fiancé, all the other nobles jumped at the opportunity, parading their daughters before me. In the end, it was decided that I should be engaged to the youngest daughter of the Hunt family, Mary Hunt, for political reasons. Fortunately, she was quite the lovable girl. Her large, round eyes were a deep hue of burnt sienna, and her long eyelashes only served to complement them. She was almost like a precious doll. With her somewhat soft voice, she greeted me with great effort. She really was adorable. As I was the youngest in my family, it almost felt like I had suddenly gained a cute little sister of my own. I was glad. Eventually, our conversation shifted to that of a small garden she had been taking care of in her manor's central courtyard. It really was beautiful. When I praised her, saying that it was a wonderful and splendid little garden, Mary smiled, ever so slightly. Her smile reminded me of a book I had read the day before called The Girl with the Green Thumb. The protagonist in the story was a girl with special hands. She had quite the talent at raising plants and caring for them. A green thumb, so to speak. Surely, Mary had these very same special hands too. And so I decided to mention this to her, but in truth, I was told a few days ago that I had a green thumb. Special hands, too. It was as if my mind had been read. Someone else had said this to Mary before me. I lost my train of thought, and was now speechless. Lady Katarina, who has been most kind to me, mentioned that to me just the day before. A change seemed to have come over Mary as she recollected the scene. Staring into space and talking about the encounter, her expression was very much reminiscent of a maiden in love. I, of course, was left in the dust, and could only respond with a pallid "Ah, is that so?" Mary seemed strangely prompted by my mere formality of a response, however, and started passionately talking about this Lady Katarina. From that day on, all Mary would talk about on my visits was Lady Katarina. When I tried to invite her over for tea, she promptly refused, stating that she had a prior appointment with Lady Katarina. Who even is this, Lady Katarina? I felt a sense of resentment rise up within me, but soon enough, this question was answered. Katarina Clays. A member of the Clays family, and the eldest daughter of Duke Clays himself, and she was Jedward's fiancée too. Jedward takes everything away from me. All the while making that smug expression of his. And now this? His fiancée, this Katarina Clays, is going to take Mary away from me? I could feel my vision darkening once more. Before I knew it, I was already on a horse carriage to the Clays manor. I was made to wait in the guest parlor. This Katarina Clays was late, but eventually she showed up and introduced herself. A girl with azure eyes and brown hair, apparently the same age as me, too. Although I would not call her ugly by any means, her blue eyes slanted upwards somewhat, giving off an impression of a somewhat strict and harsh person. This was Jedward's fiancée? The beautiful lady that Mary often praised? I could not believe my eyes. This was truly unexpected. In any case, I raised my concerns to this Katarina almost immediately. Did you know that Mary Hunt is now my fiancée? Well, yes, I do know of that. I was incensed by the fact that she could say that with a straight face and so readily, too. So you do know. Stop seducing her, then. Seduce. What? Katarina's azure eyes opened wide at the accusation. It was almost like she was pretending to know nothing about the affair. I became even more enraged. Don't play the fool. Even if I ask her out, she declines. Going all, oh, today I have an appointment with Lady Katarina. In fact, you are all she talks about when she is with me. Mary may be pure of heart, but you are clearly at fault for seducing her. There's no doubt about it. What is that supposed to mean? I've had enough of these baseless accusations of yours. With that, Katarina's already steeply slanting eyes seemed to slant upwards even more. How was this even possible? What baseless accusations? This is the truth. With that face of yours, you've corrupted my pure Mary. What is wrong with you? There's no such thing. In fact, it's your fault for asking Mary out when she already has plans to visit my manor. To begin with, if you really were charming, no girl would turn down your invitation. You're charmless. Mary keeps talking about me. Well, of course she would. It's because you're boring. No charm, boring. Before I even knew it, I was at a loss for words. While I had been treated as the leftovers in Jetord's wake all this time, this was the first time in my life I had met anyone who would say such a thing to my face. It was all too much for me. I started laughing in spite of myself. Ha! Ha ha! This is the first time I've been ridiculed to my face. That just now was. Prepare yourself, Katarina Clays. I shall take your train of insults as a thrown gauntlet, I said, somewhat haughtily, challenging Katarina on the spot. I challenge you to a duel. How did it turn out this way? I wondered, as I stood before this tree. Yes, I did challenge Katarina Clays to a duel. This matter would be settled by the sword amongst men, but Katarina was a woman. As such, I had allowed her to choose a more appropriate contest for the challenge at hand. While I had assumed she would simply suggest a match of chess or some other board game. Well, let us settle for tree climbing, then, Katarina said without batting an eye. For some reason, the words she had just uttered were unfamiliar to me. Tree climbing? What was that? Of course I knew what a tree was, and what climbing meant, but what exactly was this? I had never done anything like it in the last 8 years of my life. Maybe the children of commoners did it, but the children of nobles climbing trees? Unheard of. Katarina, as if finding my reaction amusing, asked, "Are you perhaps unable to climb trees, Prince Alan?" This was now a question of my pride as a man. I answered her without any hesitation. Nonsense. I accept your challenge. And this was why we were now standing before the 2 tallest trees in the gardens of the Clays Manor, all lined up for our challenge. The rules of the challenge were simple: the first to reach the top of their respective tree wins. Yes, with this it would be easy to discern a victor. However, I had never climbed a tree in my life before. Actually, I didn't even know how to climb trees. However, I had accepted Katarina's challenge, and so I had to do it regardless. I steeled myself, rolling up my sleeves. Well then, Prince Alan. Are you ready? Yeah. Right. Anytime. Well then. We shall begin on the count of 3. Anne, my personal maid, shall do the honors. Why yet? The challenge started under the watchful gaze of our servants and then promptly ended. I lost terribly. All I could do was climb to the very first branch of the thing I didn't know how to climb in the first place. I had no idea how to progress from that point. Katarina, however, was zipping up her tree like some sort of monkey. She was perched all the way at the very top. Why exactly is it that the eldest daughter of the Clays family is so good at climbing trees? In fact, isn't she the oldest daughter of a noble? A duke? Do the daughters of dukes usually climb trees? I could not understand this. My thoughts were tangled into an incoherent, jumbled mess. Prince Alan. We have a clear victor in this contest. Could we draw this to a close? Katarina said, turning to me with a smug expression. She seemed so full of herself. Before I knew it, the words had already left my lips. One more time. I challenge you again. This is the first time I've climbed a tree. I was simply not used to it. That is quite all right. But don't think you can win so easily, Prince. Bring it on. However, no matter how hard I tried and how many times I challenged her, Katarina always won, her speed rivaling even that of a monkey. As a result, I decided to postpone the challenge. I'd come back a few days later to settle it. A few weeks passed since I started challenging Katarina Clays. After a few more tree climbing bouts, I couldn't help but notice something. Katarina was always serious. She didn't hold back or give me any slack just because I was a prince. She also looked straight at me into me. Up until now, no one had challenged me in such a fashion earnestly, with their heart and soul. No matter how hard I tried, my twin brother, Jedward, never even looked at me. I was not reflected in his eyes. Katarina's unwavering gaze and sincere attitude caused the aching in my heart to slowly subside. I looked forward to my visits to the Clay's manor. Visiting Katarina was fun. However, that only lasted until a certain day. Jedward, what are you doing here? I exclaimed, unable to contain myself at the sudden sight of my brother at the Clay's manor. You sound as if me being here is a most mysterious thing. This is the home of my fiancé. My presence here is hardly out of place, Jedward replied, a confident smirk plastered across his face. It was as he said. I could not find a suitable retort. How could I forget that Katarina is my brother's fiancé? I was surprised at myself. In any case, I'm here for a challenge with her today. Don't get in the way. About those challenges, I heard that you have failed to achieve victory time and time again. Would it not be best to simply give up? Jedward said, his eyes cold. I could hear it. I heard it again, that talk about Jedward taking everything away from me, leaving me with only the dregs. No. We still need to settle it. I can win this. I know I can. Don't look down on me. Don't make a fool of me. My vision clouded. I could feel my surroundings fading, sinking into darkness. I had all but forgotten about it, this heavy, throbbing pain in my chest on account of how light and warm it had felt, as of late. No, this is bad. I don't feel good at all. Ah! Prince Alan. If you would accept, perhaps we could change the terms of the challenge itself? My mother will surely be greatly displeased if we keep climbing trees. Katarina, who had suddenly called out to me, had a strange expression on her face. She seemed oddly cheerful, but her smile was twitching slightly. The heavy pain in my heart ebbed slightly at the sight of her face. At Katarina's suggestion, our tree climbing challenge was called off, and was instead replaced with a musical bout with the piano, to be precise. After moving to the piano room, we began our contest. Katarina was up first, playing a practice song meant for children and other younger learners of the instrument. Although she made some small mistakes here and there, she kept playing until the end. Next was my turn. When I was done, everyone in the room was clapping. Katarina, in fact, seemed the most excited of them all. She was jumping, clapping, and even cheering. Amazing! Prince Alan, that was really amazing. Katarina praised me, just like how my tutors back in the royal castle did. Surely she was just pitying me. It's no big deal. That's not true. You have an amazing talent, Prince Alan. I don't have anything that deserves to be called a talent. Katarina did have a point. I found musical instruments more intuitive than academic studies or swordplay, but... a talent? Me? No. There's no way I could have anything like that. I was the leftovers, the dregs, after Jedward had taken away all the good bits for himself. No matter what I did, I could not possibly hope to best my brother. As Katarina said, that was most impressive, Jedward said, with that fake smile of his that he always had on his smug face. My brother could do anything. Surely he was ridiculing me again. I just knew it. My vision started fading again. The pain that had ebbed was now back in full force, stabbing itself deep into my being. But you don't really think that, do you? What is this, pity? I don't need any of this. I know you simply think of me as a failure who is good for nothing. I couldn't stand it any longer. I couldn't stand to be in the same place as Jedward. I felt like everyone was just laughing at me. I ran out of the room as fast as my legs could carry me. I ran, sprinting into the darkness. I wanted to just disappear or vanish, but instead found myself standing before the trees Katarina and I used to climb. I stood there for a while. Soon enough, I felt someone else's presence and I raised my head. I had thought a servant or member of my royal entourage had come to check up on me, but no. It was Katarina. I blurted out the words carelessly. Have you come to laugh at me, too? You're here to laugh, aren't you? Don't think you're all that just because you can play the piano, something like that, right? Whatever do you mean, Prince Alan? Just because you can play it? That's hardly a just. You have quite the remarkable talent, I'll have you know. I don't need your pity, Katarina. I'm not good for anything, after all. I'm just what's left behind after Jedward takes all the glory. I'd thought that Katarina was different from all those people in the castle. But in the end she was as them, with their pointless pity and encouragement. I knew that they were laughing at me from the shadows. After all, I myself knew how useless and unremarkable I was. That was how it had always been, and what they had always said. It's not pity. Prince Alan, why is it that you have so little confidence in yourself? Ha! I've been compared to Jedward ever since I entered this world, see? I've never won against him in any category. I bet Jedward took all the good stuff for himself when we were still in mother's womb. So if you think about it, how can leftover dregs such as I have any kind of confidence? I said in a bout of self-depreciation. Now, even Katarina would just stand still and look at me with quiet apathy. Just like everyone else. Personally, I think it is more that each of you have your own particular strengths. Your own fortes. Katarina, however, did not stand still and remain silent. What do you mean? I muttered, glaring straight at Katarina. Well. I think that Prince Jedward has things that he's suited to and good at, as well as things that he can't really handle well. The same goes for you, Prince Alan. I do believe that you have skills you can be proud of, too. It is just a matter of individual strengths and weaknesses. Individual strengths and weaknesses, you say? So are you claiming that even Jedward has something he isn't good at? I've never heard of anything like it, from then till now. Look at his smug face, his confident, cool expression. Jedward could do anything. It even extends to his tastes in food. Ever since I was born, I've never heard complaints that Jedward was picky with his meals. That's how perfect he is. Prince Jedward, good at anything and everything, unlike me. However. Phew. Well, Prince Alan, I suppose I should inform you that Prince Jedward does have a weakness. A confident smile flitted across Katarina's face. Well, the thing that Prince Jedward absolutely cannot stand is. I swallowed hard. I could only watch on in absolute silence. Ah, there he is. Jedward had wandered close by, searching for the two of us. Katarina, upon visually confirming her target, suddenly pulled something out from her pocket and tossed it at my brother. Oh warg! That mystery object landed in front of him, and a strange cry arose from the depths of Jedward's throat. In fact, I've never seen him like this. He's panicked? Nervous? Hey, hold up, so what exactly was the thing that Jedward isn't good with? What did you toss at him? Jedward was positively panicking. What was it? I had to know. Katarina answered my question with a somewhat smug expression of her own. It was a snake. A snake. I couldn't help but be surprised at this unexpected answer. Well, more accurately, it's an imitation of one. I can't exactly keep a real snake in my pocket now, can I? I don't think most people put snakes of any kind in their pockets, anyway. Well? Why did you toss it at him then? As I said, Prince Alan, I'm showing you what Prince Jedward has difficulties with. Difficulties you don't mean? Is it snakes? Yes, indeed. It was but a suspicion at first, but looking at how he just reacted, I can now say so with certainty. Prince Jedward is afraid of snakes. Katarina declared somewhat triumphantly. For some reason, she seemed really proud of what she had just said. But really? Jedward is afraid of snakes? Unthinkable. I could never have guessed it. Actually, that's not what I wanted to know. I wanted to know what I could best Jedward in. I thought perhaps he was secretly lacking in the ways of the sword, or academic knowledge. But of all things, snakes. Even so, he really does look intimidated by the thing. Look at him. This was truly unexpected. Prince Jedward, a capable and respected prince of a great kingdom, startled by a toy snake thrown by Katarina Claes? I should take back what I said. Katarina Claes, she was definitely different than the people at the royal castle. Different from most noble children, ha. Ha ha. She's really something else. What a strange girl. Lost in my thoughts, I continued pondering upon what I had just seen. Katarina, however, had been caught in the act by Jedward. Jedward was angry, all right. You could see it in his eyes and in how Katarina was slowly retreating. But it didn't really feel like he was angry, but instead simply acting the part to mess with Katarina. The Jedward I knew always seemed bored, and always had that fake smile on his face. He was uninterested in the world, and in anything else, really. That was how I saw him. Even so, Jedward had genuinely panicked at the sight of Katarina's projectile toy snake. And now, he was angry at the fact that he panicked? Is this really Jedward? I could only stare on blankly as Jedward openly announced his intent he would tell Madame Claes about all the naughty things she had done this entire time. Katarina, who had been so confident and triumphant just moments ago, now seemed pale and genuinely shaken. Why was she so proud of the discovery to begin with? Snakes? I don't understand. Look at her. She's now desperately apologizing to Jedward, and looks like she could cry at any moment. While I did empathize with the sorry sight, I could not help but laugh. This is ridiculous. Katarina, Jedward, they all look so silly. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I doubled over, hugging my stomach, and I laughed. Tears flowed from my eyes, but I laughed, and kept laughing. It was the first time in my life I had laughed like this. I was laughing, crying, which, I was no longer sure. The tears that had been locked away in my heart intermingled with my newfound tears of laughter and joy. After a while I no longer knew which was which. My vision soon cleared, and my heart felt at ease. After a while, Katarina was forcibly escorted away by Madame Claes, and in the light of this, Jedward and I returned to the royal castle. Upon our return, I called out to Jedward. Ha! Even you have something you can't deal with, hey! Before I knew it, I was speaking with Jedward casually. Come to think of it, it has been a long time since I had spoken to him in this fashion. At my words, Jedward's constantly smug smile faltered, replaced with a slight, momentary scowl. It was the first time I had ever seen him make another expression. I would not say that I cannot deal with it. It is more of something I do not like very much. For some reason, Jedward couldn't seem to maintain his usual smile at the mention, or perhaps suggestion of snakes. Something he doesn't like? So he's bad with snakes? How unexpected and silly. To think that my brother has such a side. I'd thought that you were fine with everything, and that you could do anything. Maybe that was all but an assumption on my part, in the end. Jedward was not the one that had entrapped me and made me feel inferior. All these emotions, they had welled up from inside me. All this time, I had not been seeing Jedward for who he really was. After all, even Jedward had something he couldn't handle, and I was the same. I learned that, on this day, all thanks to that strange and crazy eldest daughter of Duke Clays. Of course there are things I am bad with, and things I cannot do. Oh, really? Do tell. Encouraged by the faltering, half-scowl smile that Jedward still had on his face, I casually continued the conversation. Ah, yes, well. For example, predicting the actions of a certain Katarina Clays, I would say. Yeah. That is true, I replied, an awkward smile on my own face. Climbing trees out of nowhere with the speed of a monkey, and then suddenly hurling toy snakes at people? Even the great Jedward would be hard-pressed to predict the actions of someone like that. Katarina's triumphant face resurfaced in my mind, that face she made after she had startled Jedward with the toy snake. My cheeks felt warm. I wanted to recall that face for a while, and remember how absurd it all was. On another note, did you not have yet another challenge with Katarina today? Are you going to challenge her again soon? Yet. About that I think we're good. While I did think about it, I now felt that I was done with these challenges. All this time, I had been obsessed with winning and losing. Now, however, that all seemed like a distant lie, and a strange peace washed over my heart. Well then, in that case, we would never meet at the Clays Manor again. At? What? Why? I said, suddenly jolted back to my senses. I didn't understand what he meant by that. Why? But of course, now that you are done with your challenges, there is no further need to visit, no. Well, yes, there's that, I guess. Come to think of it, I had only been visiting the Clays Manor to compete with Katarina. Now that a contest was no longer necessary, I supposed I no longer had a reason to visit. I could see Katarina's azure eyes staring straight at me. Even if she was my brother's fiancée, not visiting the Clays Manor anymore meant that I would not see Katarina again. At least, not often. I did not like that thought. As I stood, lost in thought, Jedward suddenly looked straight at me, his eyes determined and serious. It was the first time I had seen such an expression on his face. She is my fiancée, Alan. What is he going on about? I know that already. Confused, I asked Jedward for a clarification. Ah, so you do not notice it yourself. Even so, brother, I will never let you have her, Jedward said, once more with that smug smile. With a quick turn, he was gone, swiftly walking in the general direction of his room. I didn't quite understand his point. All I could do was watch as Jedward disappeared down the hallway. Up until now, such a sight would have filled my heart with pain and sorrow, but for some reason I felt fine now. While I did not exactly like him all of a sudden, that black aura that haunted my vision seemed gone, along with the emotions that it brought about. I walked back to my room as well. On my way back, I looked out of a window and there in the garden were two tall trees, standing side by side. Again, I recalled a certain strange daughter of a duke, who was ridiculously good at climbing trees. Was she sad after being reprimanded by Madame Clays? I was the one who had challenged her in the first place, so I felt somewhat responsible for her predicament. Well, I suppose I could just visit and apologize the next time and maybe bring some of those candies and snacks that the silly girl loved so much. She would stuff her face full of them, just like some sort of tree squirrel. Ah, the mere thought of it hilarious. I feel better already. Chapter 5, My Meeting with the Beautiful Siblings. It was now the second summer since I had retrieved the memories of my past life. I was now 10 years of age. At around this time last year, my crops had been facing a wilting crisis, and Alan had been visiting all the time, challenging me to this and that. Comparatively, this year was somewhat peaceful. With my fiancé Prince Jedward setting the pace and precedent, quite a few other guests showed up at the Clays Manor. Alan and Mary were also visiting at regular intervals this year. Although the two Prince brothers did not seem to get along very well at first, they now seemed to have made amends. Alan, for his part, had begun to seriously study the piano and violin, giving his all when it came to music and instruments. His talent was noticed eventually, and now he was referred to as some sort of musical genius, blessed by the gods themselves. Mary, too, made her fair share of progress. While she was a somewhat shirking and timid girl when I had first met her, she was now the very image of a young noble lady. Despite this, she still seemed to look up to me. In fact, just the other day, Mary had made quite the bold statement, looking all dizzy as she did so. It was something along the lines of, if I were a man myself, I would very well take Lady Katarina as my bride. Ah, Mary. A lovable girl, really. While I did suggest to Mary that, well, Prince Alan is your fiancé. Should you not spend time with him instead? Mary's response, however, was swift. I refuse, as that would mean I would have less time to spend with you, Lady Katarina. It was an utterly merciless refusal. I found myself at a loss for words. Even my cute adopted brother, Keith, was now out and about, no longer locked up in that room of his. Of course, it would be a lot of trouble if Keith ended up becoming a playboy, charming the womenfolk around him. To that end, I often reminded him to be kind and gentle to women, and I personally felt that it was working. On that note, I had also been improving my catastrophic bad end avoidance strategies, namely, a key strategy to escape from the clutches of Jedward should he ever come rushing at me with a drawn sword. To ensure that I would not be unjustly cut down, I trained hard at my swordplay and footwork, even earning praise from my tutor. Gone was my old weakness. In addition, I had one more trick up my sleeve should Jedward go on the offensive. The head gardener of the Clays Manor, Grandpa Tom, was quite talented with his hands. With his advice and expert consultation, my toy snakes had become even more lifelike in every possible way. With this, Jedward would surely jump up in fright, mistaking the toy for the real thing. In fact, they were so impossibly lifelike, that I could probably make a fair amount of coin selling these at the local marketplace. Yet another strategy to cope with exile, should it ever happen. I had not exactly been slacking off in the magic department either. It was, after all, part of my plan to make a living with my magic if it came down to it. It had only been a year since I started receiving formal magic tutelage. At first, my Earth Razor spell could only create bumps of 2 to 3 centimeters. I had made significant progress since, and was now able to make small hedges around 15 centimeters in height. If I kept going at this rate, I would have to change my incantation to reflect its newfound impressiveness. Perhaps Rise, Wall of Earth, would be more fitting. My adopted brother Keith had also made good progress, and was now fully capable of controlling his own magic. In fact, even a golem the size of the one that had previously sent me flying now obediently did his bidding. Encouraged by Keith's success, I too tried manipulating an earth golem. The infusion of magic into a golem was unexpectedly difficult, however, and such precise magical techniques were still beyond me. Having been reincarnated as a noble daughter of a duke, I had assumed that my physical precision would have somewhat increased, but this was unfortunately not the case. If anything, I felt like I had not changed much at all in that regard. My magical tutor reminded me on a regular basis that one required adequate reserves of mana and magical capacity to utilize magic appropriately. Magic was truly a deep and complicated subject. And so, I spent my days in this carefree, yet fulfilling fashion. Along the way, however, I had developed one more hobby, in addition to tilling the fields and climbing trees. Said hobby was reading. By reading, I did not mean books on history or economics, no, none of those hard, stuffy subjects. The books I liked were none other than romance novels. While spoken about in hushed tones and whispers, a definitive romance novel boom was spreading across nearby towns as of late. Such novels were considered beneath a noble's tastes on account of their supposedly vulgar nature. In spite of that, many continued to enjoy them in private. As for how these books reached my desk, the answer was simple: it was thanks to a certain maid in the manor. This maid, for one reason or another, had a good understanding of current trends and other goings-on in the streets. All it took was a single loaner book. It wasn't long before I was completely hooked. My reaction was perhaps somewhat natural, given the fact that I no longer had access to the manga and anime I had so voraciously consumed in my previous life. The subject matter of these novels were varied love stories about charming princes, knights, or even stories on the beauty of friendship. While the offerings in the market paled in comparison to what I had in my past life, I immediately took to these novels like a fish to water. Perhaps it was also worth mentioning that my absolute favorite at the current moment was a story of a beautiful friendship between two girls, a princess and a commoner girl. It was called Princess Emerald and Sophia. I was ecstatic that my mother quickly approved of my newfound hobby, and promptly handed me some allowance to purchase said books. Anne's commentary probably had something to do with it. If I recall, she had said something along the lines of, "In my humble opinion, madam, it would be far more appropriate for the young miss to quietly read books in her room, as opposed to getting up to no good outside." I suppose my mother had heard this statement enough times to make up her mind. At any rate, I was now able to purchase and read the books I liked, and that was a blessing, truly. Amidst all the good news, however, was a single unfortunate development. The maid who had introduced me to these novels in the first place had recently left our employ because she was getting married. With her departure, I lost a friend and comrade, and I no longer had anyone to discuss these novels with. It filled me with such an itch. I really did want to share my passion with someone else. In my search for a kindred spirit, I even attempted to introduce such books to Anne and Mary. But they weren't interested in romance novels of any kind. A most unfortunate development indeed. I want a friend, I really do. I'll have to go looking for one at the next tea party we attend. As it happens, news arrived a few days later that Jedward and Alan were holding a tea party at the royal castle. Due to the party's royal nature, many young lords and ladies were slated to attend, and with these numbers, perhaps I would be able to find someone who truly understood my passion for romance novels. Before I knew it, I had started looking forward to this royal tea party. The event would be held in a corner of the royal gardens, a wide corner, at least, given how large the grounds were. The format would be similar to the first one I had attended at the Hunt Manor, an event mimicking the social dance parties one would attend once they were of age. As expected of a royal-hosted party, this event was larger and more grand than any I had been to before. It was on a different scale altogether, and there were also many more people in attendance. Given the fact that Jedward and Alan usually visited and spent quite a lot of time with me, it was somewhat different to only exchange brief pleasantries with them. The two were hosting the event, after all, and didn't have much time for our usual, longer conversations. Having learned my lesson from my first tea party misadventure, I refrained from stuffing my face with snacks, and instead sat still, drinking my tea as elegantly as I could manage. Of course, as expected from the royal kitchens, the tea and the snacks were both unbelievably good. I couldn't even count all the varieties of snacks on display. Suppressing my desire was slowly becoming a Herculean feat. While I tried to be strategic by limiting myself to one of each snack, I didn't expect to see a wide variety of teas on display. In a rare, but equally unfortunate occurrence, I sampled each and every one, and soon realized that I had a little too much. My stomach puffed out slightly, visibly rounder than before. I, however, had grown as a noble lady. After temporarily excusing myself as elegantly as I could, I left Keith and Mary behind, slowly and calmly heading to a nearby bathroom as my resolve was tested. As I quickly navigated the castle grounds in search for relief, however, I came across a most horrifying sight. It was a vicious dog, running free and unchained, a guard dog of some sort that had escaped from its keeper, perhaps. Honestly speaking, I was no good with dogs, if only because they seemed to have always hated me. In fact, this held true even in my past life. For some inexplicable reason, most dogs flew into a rage at the very sight of me, as if they were being confronted with an ancient enemy. To make things worse, the escaped guard dog now bared its fangs at me, as if to signal that it was a threat. But we've just met mere seconds ago. What the heck? Of course, the unchained guard dog wasted no time in making a beeline for me. While I could have scared away certain types of dogs, notably that of the Chihuahua class, this one was as large as a Doberman, and was not an enemy I could defeat. Hiking up my dress, I ran, escaping as quickly as I could. This in turn logically led to me climbing up a nearby tree for refuge. Unable to harass me as I hid amongst the tree's branches, the dog howled and growled for what seemed to be an eternity. Before long, however, a voice called out its master, perhaps, having noticed that his hound was missing. Obeying the voice, the dog turned and left, and for a while, all was still. Relieved, I started making my way downwards, only to be greeted with several humans I had not seen before. The dog was nowhere to be seen. There were 6, maybe 7 of them, and of all things, they had decided to start a conversation at the bottom of this very tree that I had climbed. If I go down now, they would know that I climbed up to begin with. A perfect, infallible daughter of a duke climbing trees in the royal castle gardens? If word of this got out, it would really be bad. I have to quickly move to another location. I was, however, at my limit. To begin with, I already needed to go to the bathroom, and then I was chased by a rabid dog, and was eventually chased up this tree. It had been quite a while. Very soon, my bladder would reach its final, ultimate limit. Even if my descent from a tree were to become a cause for rumors, I no longer had a choice. It'll be infinitely preferable to wetting myself at this age, no less. The shame. Steeling myself, I slid down the tree at full speed. The gathered individuals could only stare at me blankly, obviously taken aback by my sudden appearance. "Do excuse me, but you're in my way," I said to the small crowd that had assembled here for no apparent reason. It was as if they had been placed here by some divine force, all for the terrible purpose of preventing me from going to the bathroom. My panicked, anxious voice sounded more stern than I had intended it to be. It was almost cold and demeaning to my ears. But now was not the time to be concerned about such trivialities. As if terrified by my sudden entrance and prompt dismissal, the children scattered rapidly, like leaves in the wind. Was I that fearsome? Surely there's no need to run away from me like that. Upon closer inspection, there was one girl left standing before me, too stunned to escape, I suppose. The girl had her back to the tree in question, and didn't seem to have witnessed my dramatic entrance. As she turned around, I found myself taken aback. I swallowed, surprised at the sight. She was beautiful, to say the least. Her crimson eyes complemented her snow-white hair, a stunning girl with smooth, fair skin that was almost translucent. For a split second, I was entranced by her beauty, only to be rudely jolted back to reality by the intense pressure in my bladder. If I didn't make it to the bathroom soon, a tragedy would surely occur. Mustering up all my willpower, I smiled as gently as I could to the somewhat frightened girl, my best attempts at reassuring her, given the situation. And then I turned and rushed off in the appropriate direction. By some stroke of luck, I eventually made it, thus preventing the outbreak of a true tragedy over the course of this tea party. The worst was now over, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I would one day be bested by these treacherous events. From now on, I would have to seriously consider a portable toilet of some kind whenever I attended a tea party. I entertained the thought for a while with a serious expression on my otherwise relieved face. Having managed to reach the bathroom without incident, I returned to where I had originally sat at the tea party, only to find that Keith and Mary were nowhere in sight. There were simply too many people. Complaining inwardly, I soon acted on my frustrations, stuffing whatever leftover snacks I could reach into my mouth. A small voice drifted out from behind me. Turning around, I came face to face with the stunningly beautiful girl whom I had met at the tree. You were the one from just now. Why, yes. That is correct. The beautiful girl said, nodding slowly. Now that I had a good look at her, she truly was breathtaking. Although I was used to beautiful people in general thanks to Prince Jedward and my merry band of friends, this girl was in a class of her own. I swallowed hard in spite of myself. Her pure white hair almost seemed like strands of silk, cascading in a silent, frozen waterfall. Her skin was reminiscent of freshly fallen snow, impossibly pure and soft. Her features only seemed to accentuate her crimson eyes. Those very same eyes were staring straight into my soul. She reminded me of a character in a romance novel. Actually, that's right. She looks exactly like Sophia, from that trending novel Princess Emerald and Sophia. Sophia was of common birth. She had black, silky hair, and equally black, soulful eyes. Her skin was white like snow. A true beauty. The princess, who had sneaked out into the town, was captivated by Sophia's beauty. The girl before me was like a real incarnation of Sophia herself. But unlike the character, she was here, standing before me in the flesh. I stared at the girl, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. About just now. Her snow-white cheeks were now flushed, a gentle shade of red slowly spreading through her face. Ah, this is just like that scene. Just like how Sophia reacts when she first lays eyes upon Princess Emerald. That very same blush. Unfortunately for the girl, I was no beautiful princess, but instead Katarina Clay's, villainess extraordinaire, all thanks to this face of mine. If I recall, the princess said this exact line to Sophia. What pretty hair you have. Just like strands of silk. Would you mind if I ran my fingers through it, just ever so slightly? The girl before me seemed shocked. Her expression was enough to wake me up from my daydream. Ugh! What have I done? My fantasies slipped out from my lips before I knew it. The girl shifted her weight from one leg to another, apparently in a state of panic. A natural reaction if confronted by a fairy tale prince, of course. But to think that the person who said it to her was none other than me, with my villainous-like face. If I were her, I would be afraid, truly afraid. I meant to say. I desperately searched for an excuse. The panicked girl, however, suddenly blurted out a line of her own. Princess Emerald. What could this possibly be? Before I could stop myself, I gripped her shoulders, moving my face close to hers. Princess Emerald. From the romance novels. Perhaps maybe. You know of Princess Emerald and Sophia too. Intimidated by my sudden approach and the fact that I was gripping her by the shoulders, the girl nodded rapidly, her panic hardly fading. Encouraged, I listed off various titles, only to have the girl nod at each and every single one of them. I can't believe it. I've found her. My comrade in arms in romance novel appreciation. That's not all. Just like the character in the story, she's also stunningly beautiful. I am overcome. With emotion, with gratitude. I stood, shivering in place. What are you doing, big sister? A familiar, yet somewhat suspicious sounding voice. Suspicious of me? Turning in the direction of the voice, I was greeted by Keith, my adopted brother, flanked by Mary. What? Whatever do? I turned back to the girl, observing my own behavior. I had apparently captured her with my hands, one on each shoulder at some point in time. My face was close to hers, and my nostrils were flared up in excitement. Ah, yes. I look like the classic pervert. Wah. I apologize. I muttered, promptly letting the girl go. I could feel surprised stares converging on me from all directions. Yes, truly I am sorry. In my sudden bout of elation, all logic left my being. Come to think of it, I don't even know her name. And to make it worse, I didn't tell her mine. What terrible social faux pas, enough to disqualify me as a noble lady. Lifting my dress as slightly and elegantly as I could, I curtsied, issuing a formal social greeting. I do apologize for my manners. I am Katarina Clays. Very pleased to make your acquaintance. Despite the fact that she had been captured by a suspicious-looking villainess, and was now being formally greeted by her. The girl greeted me in kind as expected of little ladies with noble upbringing. Sophia Askert. What? She's Sophia? Like the Sophia in the book? Was Sophia based off this beautiful girl before me? My unbridled excitement and literary arousal was off the charts. Lady Sophia. If it would please you, would you like to speak in greater detail with me? I asked enthusiastically, grasping Sophia's hands in my own. Keith, however, who had been standing next to me this entire time, promptly reminded me of the situation at hand. Big sister, I do apologize for interrupting you in the midst of such spirited conversation, but the tea party has already ended. We should make the appropriate preparations and return to the manor. What? But my passionate discussions on novels. We've barely started. In that case. Well then, Lady Sophia. If you would like, please feel free to pay a visit to the Clay's manor. Grasping Sophia's hands once again, I issued her a quick invitation, and was elated as she promptly accepted. I did it. Not wanting to waste the opportunity, I decided on a date and time for the visit on the spot. Well then, I will be eagerly awaiting your arrival. With that, and an adequately large smile, I bid Sophia farewell and turned to return to the manor with Keith. And so it came to be that I met the comrade I desired at this royal tea party. Not only would she discuss my favorite novels with me, she even looked like a character from my favorite book. What a huge success! I grinned widely all the way back in the horse carriage as Keith looked on, a somewhat surprised and flabbergasted expression on his face. It was soon the promised day, and as expected, Sophia turned up at the Clay's manor. I had been looking forward to this the entire morning. Young miss, the Lady Sophia you had been speaking about has arrived, but Anne, apparently here to inform me of Sophia's arrival, seemed a little off. But this is it. Sophia is here. In my haste to see her, I dashed out of the room, leaving Anne with a cursory word of thanks. As expected, Sophia was standing in the guest parlor, awaiting my arrival. Beautiful as always, but oh! For some reason, there was another person by her side, a ravishing youth. With his raven black hair and eyes, he seemed somewhat different from Sophia in appearance. Upon closer inspection, however, I found that this was not the case. Their facial similarities suggested familial ties. Like two perfect dolls, they stood side by side, perfectly complementing each other. If I had to guess, this was the reason why Anne was so surprised earlier. Entranced by their beauty, I could only stare at them in wonderment. The boy, however, was the first to call out to me. Thank you very much for extending an invitation to my sister. My sister seldom ventures out on her own, so I have come with her. My name is Nicole. I am Sophia's elder brother. My hunch was indeed accurate. This impossibly handsome youth was Sophia's brother. I was slightly surprised at Nicole's statement. Sophia must have been quite the sheltered child. Perhaps I wasn't one to talk. I was sheltered in my own way, primarily due to my mother insisting that you will have Keith accompany you when heading out at all times. You will listen to what Keith says, and under no circumstances will you do anything strange. As such, Keith was predictably always by my side. Yes, on account of us both being so sheltered, we will surely be fast friends. With those thoughts in mind, I curtsied properly, first to Sophia's brother and then to Sophia herself. No, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for coming. I am Katerina Clays. Nicole Askert, elder brother of Sophia Askert. Pleased to make your acquaintance, he said, introducing himself once more. I froze at those words. Nicole Askert, a name that I was familiar with. I had definitely heard it somewhere before. Ah, excuse my ignorance, but would you happen to be Chancellor Askert's son? Yes. That is correct. No way. This person is a potential love interest in Fortune Lover, Nicole Askert. No wonder he's so pretty and handsome. Honestly speaking, I had wanted to drop everything and return to my room this very instant so I could pull out the archives and give them a good read. That wasn't exactly something I could do in this moment, so I did my best to recall what details I could. Nicole Askert, son of Chancellor Askert, and a childhood friend of Alan's. A year older than the protagonist, and an upperclassman in the academy who was famous for saying relatively little. Nope, this is all I can recall at the moment. To begin with, I still hadn't attempted Nichols' route before my untimely death. I'd planned to do it after finally succeeding with Jetord. As a result, I knew very little of Nichols' route primarily on the account that I hadn't even touched it. If not for one of my friends introducing the character to me, I would have never heard of him at all. That friend of mine had cleared his route beforehand, and was telling us all about it. Let me see, according to what my friend Akin said, the rival character in Nichols' route is that's right. His sister. Yes, I remember now. Nicole is hopelessly overprotective of his sister, and so Sophia is the rival in this case. To successfully romance Nicole, one would first have to appropriately interact with Sophia. I vaguely recall Akin saying something like that. Ah, thank you so much, Akin. And I am also very sorry for getting upset about the spoilers. Who would think that Akin's spoilers would be of assistance to me in such a scenario? So if the rival character is indeed Sophia, that would mean that Katarina has nothing to do with it. There are no catastrophic bad ends with Nicole. In addition, if Sophia is indeed the rival character, Katarina won't have any famous lines to steal, unlike the incident with Alan and Mary. At the very least, I hope I won't end up doing the same thing again. Well then. With this, there'll be no problems even if I become good friends with Sophia. After all, she's an ally, a comrade in arms in my enjoyment of romance novels. I would never let her escape so easily. Lady Katarina. It would seem that I, Katarina Clays, had once again fallen prey to my mental fantasies. Before I knew it, Sophia was looking straight at me with worry evident on her pretty face. Ah, Lady Sophia. I do apologize. It is nice to meet you again, truly. If you would like, I would be glad to continue our previous conversation. With that, I invited Sophia to a table that had been prepared for the occasion, lined with delicious tea and snacks. After that, Sophia and I spent quite some meaningful hours together. While she was somewhat reserved and fearful at first, perhaps in response to a strange new environment, Sophia eventually opened up as the conversation shifted to books. She really seemed to love her books. In addition to contemporary romance novels, she also read older fairy tales and myths, along with historical fiction and many other genres. It was truly an interesting conversation. She even gave me a few recommendations. If there was one thing that did slightly bother me, however, it was the fact that Sophia's brother Nicole hardly said a thing. In fact, he distanced himself from our discussion, simply watching on quietly. I felt somewhat bad about excluding him while we were having a cheerful and adequately girlish conversation. Perhaps I should have called Keith here to keep him company. He really was quiet, just like his character setting. What a waste, given how dashing he is. Time passed all too quickly without either of us noticing. We were both brought back to reality all too soon by one of Sophia's entourage, who whispered that it was almost time for her to return. Quickly standing up in response to the statement, Sophia's hair glittered and shimmered, shining silently as I watched on, entranced. It's really beautiful. There's no mistake about it. Surely it would feel just like silk. Would she mind if I touched it just a little bit? What beautiful hair you have. Would you mind if I ran my fingers through it, just ever so slightly? The words had already escaped my lips before I could catch myself. I had blurted out a line from Princess Emerald and Sophia and had delivered the line as if I were the princess herself. In the novel, however, Sophia was blushing, her face stained a soft crimson. But here... what a disaster! I seem to have startled Sophia greatly. Oh no, I've done it. She looks positively distressed. What have you done now, Katarina Clays? While I had always happily played with Mary's soft, sometimes wavy hair, I hadn't thought about the fact that touching another noble lady's hair in this world may be a social faux pas. Mary, of course, always seemed glad, but still. To make things worse, I grabbed her by the shoulders and breathed into her face when I first met her. Surely she thinks I'm some sort of deviant. A pervert. What a terrible turn of events. Even if I do have a face of a villainess, I don't want the title of pervert. Anything but that. Well. I stood rooted to the spot, internally panicking as I searched for an excuse. Sophia repeated herself, her voice weak and quivering. It was an almost inaudible whisper. I calmly asked her to repeat herself. Does it not disgust you? Sophia said, in a louder voice now. Disgust? Disgust you? Me? Wait. Is she disgusted by my seemingly perverse actions? No, Sophia. You have it all wrong, I'm not a pervert at all. All right, so maybe there was that incident from a year ago where I supposedly seduced Mary away from a certain haughty prince, but I don't swing that way. I'm normal. I'm just a normal girl. About that, an excuse. Think of one, quickly. Do it now. Are you not disgusted by my appearance, Lady Katarina? I stood, gaping, having lost all my words and the train of thought behind them. What? The disgusting one here isn't me but Sophia? What? Sophia continued on, evidently close to tears, as I stood with my mouth still agape like that of a gasping goldfish. Does it not disgust you, Lady Katarina? This white hair of mine, only seen in the elderly, these blood-red eyes. Everyone calls me a disgusting, cursed child. What? How can something so beautiful be disgusting? Thus far, I had seen blonde, silver, brown, red, and black eyes and hair amongst the denizens of this world. As such, I had simply assumed that Sophia's white hair and red eyes were relatively normal. To think she was ostracized for it. Wasn't that strange? And then there was that. Cursed? What do you mean? Sophia attempted to answer my question, even amidst her tumultuous emotions. But it was Nicole, her brother, who spoke first. Malicious rumors. From certain individuals who are jealous of our family's achievements. Such jealousy causes them to spread these baseless accusations. That made some sense, the Askerts were a formidable family. I suppose it was only natural for the strong and capable to have many enemies, and of course, these enemies and detractors would in turn spread nasty rumors about them. This was true even for the Clays family. While Keith was capable and skilled, and I had tried my best to cultivate a noble image, rumors on the street claimed that we were strange and eccentric. Baseless accusations indeed. Jealousy is a terrible and frightful thing. Even so, it does little to change the fact that my appearance is disgusting and revolting, Sophia said, with a surprising amount of conviction and force. She must have heard many of these rumors whispered around her person. while it was true that I had never seen anyone quite like Sophia all this time. Well, I personally think you are very pretty. Sophia's eyes opened wide. She stared straight at me, no, into me, as I continued, meeting her gaze. I think that your silky white hair is beautiful. That your ruby red, sparkling eyes are beautiful. That you are beautiful. Now that I've made myself clear, perhaps I'll stop coming across as a pervert. Anything but that. No pervert labels shall befall me. If I have a villainous-like face and am labeled a pervert, I have no idea what I would do. Rest assured, Sophia. I am normal, the very epitome of normal. Attempting to reassure her, I gave Sophia my warmest possible smile. Actually, I would be so pleased if you would come and visit again. And if you don't mind, would you like to be my friend? Saying so, I held out a hand and was surprised when Sophia grasped it in her own. Her beautiful, gentle white hands were tightly holding mine. Fortunately, she no longer had a surprised or shocked expression on her face. This was the story of how I made my first romance novel appreciating friend. I saw Sophia and her entourage out to the porch and waved as they boarded their horse carriage. Immediately after, I returned to my room and pulled out the archive of memories on the game I played in my past life. As expected, there were not many details recorded within. While I was surprised that Sophia was a rival character just like Katarina, I had not done anything strange or untoward this time. I felt a wave of relief wash over my being. If anything, I was happy Sophia was of the same age as Katarina, and also had reserves of magic within her. This, of course, meant that we would be in the same year at the Magic Academy. We would be able to discuss romance novels, even in class. Overcome with happiness, I jumped up from my bed, bouncing as I landed. This behavior, of course, earned me a stern warning from Anne. And that was how Sophia ended up coming on regular visits to the Clay's manor along with Nicole, her silent brother. Perhaps it was due to the influence of Sophia and my passionate conversations, but Mary eventually began to show some interest too. She eventually asked, "May I borrow a book, Lady Katarina?" Before long, Mary had joined our novel appreciation group, and our conversations became even more lively. I even took Sophia out to the fields one day, on account of her never having played much outside before. In fact, she even started assisting me with my crops. While they were both surprised at first, Sophia and Nicole were now very much used to me, and did not react much even if I showed up in my gardening overalls. With this, the Clay's manor gained yet another regular visitor, and I, a great friend. My name is Sophia Askert, eldest daughter of the Askert family. I was born to Count Askert, my father, who was chancellor to the king. The king valued and trusted him greatly. My father was a gentle person just like my mother and older brother. I was born into privilege, and blessed with a kind, loving family. I had really been blessed ever since I was born. I was truly happy, and maybe that was why it happened, as a price for my happiness and blessings. I was born different than the others around me. My hair was white, stark white as if all color had fallen from it. My eyes were red as blood. My appearance was abnormal. People would cast their curious gazes at me, and eventually whisper about me in the shadows, calling me a cursed child. Even so, my family loved me dearly. My father, who would gently pat my head, my mother, who would lovingly hold me, and my dear brother, who was always at my side, protecting me with all his being. My gentle family told me that one day, someone who understood me would appear. They told me that I would surely be able to make great friends, but I did not think that was true. That was why I shut myself in my room. I did not want anyone to look upon me, and I isolated myself as much as possible. In my quiet room, I read book after book. The wondrous, beautiful stories within transported me away from my cruel reality. When I was reading, I could forget about all my troubles. Amongst these books, my favorite was one about a friendship between a princess and a young commoner girl, Princess Emerald and Sophia. The girl in the story shared a name with me. She, too, was Sophia. But in the story, Sophia was popular and cheerful, with a head full of jet black hair and a pair of sparkling black eyes. The princess would eventually cross paths with Sophia. "What beautiful hair you have, would you mind if I ran my fingers through it, just ever so slightly?" the princess said, turning to Sophia with a gentle smile. Sophia smiled back shyly. It was a most splendid story, one that a cursed child like me could not possibly experience. This was why I continued locking myself up in my room, fantasizing about becoming Sophia, the Sophia in the stories with Princess Emerald. In my imagination, at least, I could be a girl that was popular and loved by those around her. "Sophia, please do go to the tea party at the royal castle," my father said to me, gently as ever, one day. Up until now, I had not attended any sort of tea party. After all, a single step outside was all it took for people to start whispering about my cursed appearance. So I really did not want to go outside. I told my gentle father how I felt. I really did not want to go. But my father, who usually gave in to my demands, did not nod his head on that day. "Listen, Sophia. Magic dwells in you, and when you come of age, you will be enrolled in the academy, just like your peers. It would not do you much good to stay cooped up in your room all day. The upcoming tea party is hosted by the royal princes, and many noble children will be in attendance. Some of them would even attend the academy with you. If it hurts or becomes difficult, Sophia, then you can come home early, but at the very least, you need to see a little more of the outside world." Of course, I knew this was true. When I reached 15 years of age, I would be forced to attend the academy. Even I knew that I could not remain in my room forever, lost in my fantasies and stories. "At the very least, you need to see a little more of the outside world," my father said. He was right. Regardless of my misgivings, I did my best to muster up some courage, and decided to attend this tea party. And so, my brother Nicole and I attended a tea party for the very first time in my life. It was a large and fancy party, held in one of the corners of the royal gardens. There were many people there, crowds of a size I had never seen before. At first, I wandered around with my brother, looking at various snacks and teas I had never seen before. But soon we were separated, and I found myself surrounded by many other noble children. All of them had the same severe, judgmental expressions. They ended up bringing me to a tree on the outskirts of the tea party, and under it, we stood. Do you even know how important of an occasion this is? This is the first tea party hosted by the royal princes. That's right. If a cursed child like you shows up at an event like this, you'll spoil everything. Why are you even here? You shouldn't be showing that shameful cursed face of yours around. They surrounded me, all the while saying terrible things. I knew that I looked disgusting. I knew that people hated me. Even so, all I could do was stand quietly, biting my lip in silence. I should never have left my room. I would have been safe if I stayed locked up, and something like this would not happen to me. Just as those thoughts crossed my mind. "Do excuse me, but you're in my way." A clear voice rang out from behind me. I turned around, and standing before me was a girl. She was cool, composed, and elegant just like Princess Emerald herself. When did she appear? How did she get there? With a single, cool dismissal, the bullies that had surrounded me scattered to the winds. It was all so sudden, and I did not understand what was happening, but I did know that this girl had helped me. I could only stand in place, stunned, as the girl smiled at me in that same composed and confident manner. Soon she turned around, briskly walking off to some unknown destination. For a while, my eyes were trained on her silhouette, and all I could do was stare. I hid behind the tree, afraid that the bullies would return. I only made my way back to the tea party after affirming that they were indeed gone, and as fate would have it, I crossed paths with the girl from earlier. I should thank her for helping me, and so, I mustered up my courage once more, approaching her with a shaky voice. She turned around in an impossibly graceful manner, with that same calm and collected expression on her face. About just now. I was too nervous. My voice, it wouldn't come out. Her azure eyes stared straight into mine, then her lips parted, and she spoke. What pretty hair you have. Just like strands of silk. Would you mind if I ran my fingers through it, just ever so slightly? It was a line from Princess Emerald and Sophia I would know, having read it dozens of times. It was what was said to the bright and cheerful Sophia as she crossed paths with a mysterious girl in town, a girl with an aura of refinement and confidence. Her name was Princess Emerald, I said, without thinking. And then, Princess Emerald. From the romance novels. Perhaps, maybe. You know of Princess Emerald and Sophia too. Before I knew it, the girl had her hands on my shoulders. I could only stand in shocked silence. Why did this girl suddenly say one of Princess Emerald's lines? Why was she holding me so tightly by the shoulders? I did not know what was going on anymore. Only curious gazes, or cold, judgmental ones, had been cast at me all my life. And yet this girl's eyes were sparkling, they shone as she looked straight at me. I have never seen anyone look at me in this manner before. My confusion intensified. Swept along by the flow, I could only meekly nod as the girl asked me a variety of questions, seemingly getting more excited by the minute. What are you doing, big sister? A surprised voice from the sidelines. I turned, and there stood a handsome youth with brown hair and blue eyes. The two seemed to know each other. Wah! I apologize. The girl finally let go of me at the youth's question. She then curtsied most elegantly, finally introducing herself. I do apologize for my manners. I am Katarina Clays. Very pleased to make your acquaintance. Her mannerisms and countenance, it was really like she was Princess Emerald, in the flesh. I soon realized that I had to return the greeting with one of my own, and quickly did so in a somewhat panicked manner. Sophia Askert. And then a most unbelievable thing occurred. Lady Sophia. If it would please you, would you like to speak in greater detail with me? The girl, no, Katarina's hands were now holding mine. What is this girl saying? Does she know what I am? I could not understand the situation, and only stood still, silent. And then... Well then, Lady Sophia. If you would like, please feel free to pay a visit to the Clays Manor. Yes. I will. Before I knew it, I had promised Katarina that I would pay her a visit. Even as we finalized the details of my attendance, I felt lost and confused, no longer sure if this was reality, or the dreams and fantasies that I had always imagined while locked away in my room. And so the promised day arrived. I had never gone outside on my own, and so naturally, my gentle and caring brother accompanied me. My brother was a year older than me, with a head of raven black hair and deep, thoughtful eyes. He had come along to protect me. Having him next to me was truly reassuring. And so I mustered up my courage and made the trip to the Clay's manor. When we arrived, the servants who welcomed us stared at me with expressions of surprise and shock. Although I was already used to all this, I could feel what little courage I gathered rapidly fading. Perhaps this is all just another prank. As my unease consumed me, she appeared. Her refined features, her rapid breaths, it seemed like she had rushed all the way here. Katarina, however, simply stared at us, not saying a single word. Is it true? Is it all just a joke, after all? Was I mistaken in coming here? I froze in place, and words never left my lips. My dependable brother, however, spoke up in my stead. Thank you very much for extending an invitation to my sister. My sister seldom ventures out on her own, so I have come with her. My name is Nicole. I am Sophia's elder brother. As if shaken awake by my brother's words, Katarina promptly offered her own response. No, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for coming. I am Katarina Clays. Thank you for coming? So this isn't some prank or joke. Is it really all right for me to be here? Nicole Askert, elder brother of Sophia Askert. Pleased to make your acquaintance, my brother said, once again stating his name. For some reason, Katarina froze for a moment, not moving in the slightest. I wonder what's wrong? I called out to her, worried about her strange state. Lady Katarina. Lady Sophia. I do apologize. It is nice to meet you again, truly. If you would like, I would be glad to continue our previous conversation. And with that, Katarina invited us to a table seemingly prepared for the occasion, with tea, snacks, and all. While I felt very uneasy at first, that unpleasant feeling slowly faded as I started speaking with Katarina. It was the first time I had ever been able to speak with someone else about the books I loved. Time passed as if it were a dream. And just like a dream, it was fleeting. Before I knew it, the sun was setting. One of our servants leaned in, informing me that it was time for the dream to end, that we had to return. I stood up, ready to go, and it was then that Katarina called out to me. What beautiful hair you have! Would you mind if I ran my fingers through it, just ever so slightly? I could only stare blankly, my features frozen in confusion. What is she talking about? There's no way this disgusting white hair of mine could be beautiful. Before I could stop myself, I asked the question I had always wanted to ask. It was that nagging suspicion I'd had in my mind ever since I met her. Are you not disgusted by my appearance, Lady Katarina? Those looks that were leveled at me as I ventured to the outside world, and the whispers in the shadows, speaking of how repulsive my appearance was. Does it not disgust you, Lady Katarina? This white hair of mine, only seen in the elderly, these blood-red eyes. Everyone calls me a disgusting, cursed child. There was not a single part of me that could be beautiful in any way. I was nothing more than a disgusting thing to be avoided, something for others to avert their gazes from. Nothing more. Cursed? Whatever do you mean? Katarina said, stuttering in her confusion. Malicious rumors. From certain individuals who are jealous of our family's achievements. Such jealousy causes them to spread these baseless accusations. My brother's voice echoed coldly through the room. My gentle brother, my family once again protecting me from the world like always. Even so, it does little to change the fact that my appearance is disgusting and revolting. There was no shortage of heartless statements directed at my strange appearance. It had always been this way. Why was I born like this? I wish I had been born beautiful just like Sophia from my favorite story. Well, I personally think you are very pretty, Katarina said. Pretty? What is she talking about? I stared straight at her. I think that your silky white hair is beautiful. That your ruby red, sparkling eyes are beautiful. That you are beautiful, Katarina said, smiling at me as she did so. Silky white hair, ruby red, sparkling eyes. Are these truly words that could be used to describe one such as myself? It's unbelievable, those words are unbelievable. Her aqua blue eyes, however, did not speak of lies as they stared into mine. Katarina, like a hero of justice, she came to my rescue at the tea party. A girl just like Princess Emerald from my favorite story. Actually, I would be most pleased if you would come and visit again. And if you don't mind, would you like to be my friend? Katarina said, her hands reaching out towards me. One day, someone who understands you will appear, Sophia. And you will be great friends. I had never once nodded when any member of my beloved family had told me this. It was, after all, impossible. I'd thought that no one like that could ever exist. I, who had been treated like an outcast, who was always regarded with strange, fearful gazes. To think that anyone would ask for me to become friends with them. I slowly took Katarina's hands in my own shivering palms. She held my hands tightly, smiling gently as she held onto them. Is this a dream? I could no longer tell as I sat in the horse carriage, still stunned from the events. My brother, however, smiled at me, a smile that I did not often see. I am glad that you have made a friend. A friend. I'd thought that it would be impossible for one such as myself. That was why I had remained holed up in my room, with nothing but my imagination and daydreams for company. In reality I had wanted, desired, a friend. For the longest time that was all I ever wanted. I recalled the warmth of Katarina's hands and the happy smile on her face. I had always wanted someone like that, but then, I had given up. And now, I held that very thing tight in my hands. From then on, we continued our visits to the Clay's Manor, and in doing so got to know some of Katarina's other friends, including her brother and the two crown princes. Before I knew it, my previously cramped and isolated world had expanded almost impossibly, in the blink of an eye. Mary, another friend of Katarina's, said this to me. A while ago I hated myself. I hated these hair and eyes of mine, that they were this shade of burnt sienna. I was surprised. Mary was much like Katarina, a noble lady of certain means, and yet, she hated herself? Look at her beautiful hair, her stunning eyes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But when Lady Katarina told me that I was lovable, that I was cute, and that she liked me for who I was, I found that I could no longer hate myself. I found that I loved my hair, my eyes, and so, Lady Sophia, I think that you will be quite all right as well, Mary said, looking at me earnestly as she did so. All the individuals gathered in this manor, Mary included, did not think of me as disgusting or revolting. Katarina herself said as such that my hair and my eyes were beautiful, wonderful things. All the people I had met up until now thought that I was disgusting, but Katarina was different. Her heartfelt praise made this clear. Will I one day come to love myself, like Mary has? Will a day ever come where I will be able to accept this strange appearance of mine? The future was still a mystery to me. Even so, I now felt that such a day could eventually come to pass. Thank you very much, I said gratefully to Mary. Mary, however, smiled brazenly, much like how Katarina did. Just so you know, I have no intentions of handing Lady Katarina over. I once thought that reading alone in my room was the best thing I could ever do. I never knew that I would find something so much more amazing in this wondrous world that I had suddenly been thrust into. As summer reached its end, the world was now colored in the beginnings of autumn. Several weeks had passed since Sophia and her brother, Nicole, first visited me at my abode. With the addition of Sophia, even Mary got interested, and the three of us were collectively swept up in a romance novel boom. Thanks to Sophia's bibliophilic nature and encyclopedic knowledge, the genres covered in our meetings greatly expanded in scope. On another note, the current romance novel I was infatuated with was quite something else, a story about a devilishly dashing count and his romance with a younger girl. The count was so incredibly breathtaking that he charmed both men and women alike, but he instead falls in love with a normal girl living in a small town. It was a sweet story of love and romance. I had, of course, started reading this novel under Sophia's recommendation. The count in question was an incredibly beautiful youth, with jet black hair and eyes. Actually, I noticed that the count looked like my brother, and so I ended up liking this series. Was what Sophia told me, albeit in whispers. My opinion may be biased, he is my brother, after all. So said Sophia, seemingly embarrassed at the notion. The more I read this novel, however, the more I noticed the similarities. Although Jedward, Keith, and Alan were all handsome in their own right, Sophia's brother, Nicole, was quite different, in his aura and charms. His doll-like features, smooth, black hair, and then there were those eyes of his that had a mysterious ability to draw one deeper and deeper into his gaze. If he continued to age in this fashion, I could definitely see him becoming that very same alluring count in my novel, bewitching both men and women alike. However, there were still too many unknowns with regards to Sophia's brother, Nicole. Come to think of it, it was written in Fortune Lover's Manual that Nicole had the most common sense amongst the rest of the game's potential romantic interests. In addition, he was also the older brother of one of my beloved friends. I wanted to get along with him very much. However, Nicole was a man of few words. When he did speak, the conversation would often end in one or two phrases. Due to the fact that my surroundings were often busy and bustling, the naturally quiet Nicole hardly had a chance to speak with me much, if at all. Be as it may, his actions communicated his love for Sophia, and he even put up with all our antics. Nicole was a very good brother indeed. It was not difficult to understand why Sophia would look up to such a brother. In fact, if the rumors were to be believed, Nicole excelled in both academics and the sword, a high-spec character, just like Jedward and Alan. If the opportunity comes to pass, I really want to speak more with Nicole. Not long after I had this thought, said opportunity presented itself to me. If you would like, we could have a reading session at my humble abode. Day after day, I had pestered Sophia about her books, as I really wanted to see them. So she eventually invited me over. I couldn't help but feel that I had coerced her into doing it, maybe just a little. Really? Can I really come? I exclaimed, jumping up and down for joy. Sophia simply smiled at me, while Anne's eyebrows furrowed, occasionally twitching. Madam would be most displeased to see you behave as such, young miss. And so it came to be that I paid the Askerts a visit at their home. Although I was mainly there to go through Sophia's books and talk about novels, I also hoped to speak with Nicole. It was important to get to know him a little better, especially with how Sophia looked up to him. Steeling myself, I made up my mind to get more than 2 phrases out of Nicole on this visit. Eventually, the promised day came to pass. Eager to get my hands on Sophia's prized collection, I hopped on the horse carriage bound for the Askert family home. Naturally, Keith was with me as well, on account of me supposedly being the spoiled and socially inept daughter of the Clays family. Mother was worried as usual, giving me yet another warning as I left. Do be careful, Katerina. And please, do not embarrass yourself. How very like Mother to say such a thing. I had been to many tea parties now, and even visited Mary's Manor several times. We were close. There were no problems, of course. Why would there be? Having finally arrived at the Askert home with Keith, I found it not as big as the Clays Manor, but it was clean, well organized, and decorated in good taste. We were led by the servants to what seemed to be a reception area with tea and other offerings. Just as we were about to settle in, a couple entered the room, a most handsome man, with an elegant and dignified lady by his side. They seemed to be about the same age as my parents. I was expecting my friend Sophia, not this impossibly beautiful couple. This sudden development stunned me, and for a while I stared at them in awe. So who exactly are these beautiful people? Just as that thought crossed my mind, the man turned to me, smiling brightly. A pleasure to meet you. I am Nicole and Sophia's father, Dan Askert. This is my wife, Reijou. Reijou Askert. A pleasure. Having delivered their greetings, they both smiled gently, welcoming me into their household. What? These are Sophia and Nicole's parents. As expected, they were formidably beautiful individuals. If this was the case, this must be the very same capable man who had taken on the position of Chancellor, directly serving the king himself. The rumored royal chancellor. I turned to Madame Askert to see that gentle smile still illuminating her features. Just like Nicole, Count Askert had black hair. Madame Askert was impressive as well, with her pale, golden blonde hair and blue eyes. If I didn't know any better, I would have assumed they were characters straight out of a fairy tale. As expected of Sophia and Nicole's parents. Still stunned by their fairy tale radiance, I continued staring at them both, mouth agape, until Keith gave my hand a slight push. Big sister, your greetings. Keith whispered. That's right. In these circumstances, right, a noble lady's socially acceptable greeting. The pleasure is mine. I am Katerina Clays. Thank you very much for inviting me here on this day. I am her younger brother, Keith Clays. We are in your care. As soon as I had delivered my elegant greeting befitting of a young noble lady, Keith followed up with his own. Yes. We did our introductions correctly. But what are Sophia's parents doing here? My confusion was perhaps apparent on my face. We had thought to greet you first. Sophia and her brother have not been informed yet, you see. She is probably fidgeting up there in her room, waiting for you as we speak. Count Askert provided a quick answer to my unspoken question. Is that so? While I now knew why Sophia's parents were here, this was the first time someone else's parents had come in person to greet me. I couldn't help but feel nervous. While I had been to Mary's abode several times, her father was often busy, and as such was often not at home. In fact, I had not seen him ever since that very first tea party I attended. Going to a friend's home to play was nothing new to me, but having their parents show up to greet me was. Nervous, I clammed up, standing stiff like a board. Madame Askert, however, elegantly and slowly approached me. I have heard many things about you from my daughter, Lady Katarina. Ever since she met you, Sophia has been so happy. Thank you very much, she said, before holding out a hand. Now that I could see her up close, she really was quite the beauty. Her features also resembled that of Sophia's, or was it the other way around? Reaching out nervously, I took her outstretched hand in mine. I am most grateful as well. I greatly enjoy speaking with Lady Sophia. I would be glad if we could continue getting along from here on out. In truth, I had been able to live this fulfilling romance novel life of mine largely thanks to Sophia. If I had not met her, my life would not have been enriched with these wonderful stories. Of course I would want to continue being friends with her. Upon hearing my words, Madame Askert, who really did look like Sophia, squeezed my hand somewhat tightly. I am really glad that Sophia has a wonderful friend like you. And with that, Madame Askert and the Count both bowed their heads. I would like to thank you too. Lady Katarina Clays, thank you. Truly. Yes, thank you too, yes. My nervousness peaked to think that this beautiful couple would bow to me, of all people. I was now flustered, panicked. I had wanted to part ways with a dignified greeting, but with this, all of my efforts were wasted. Even so, both Count and Madame Askert simply continued smiling at me warmly, paying no heed to my panicked flustering. What gentle, kind parents! And with that same welcoming smile, they left the room, telling that they would soon fetch Sophia. Even their exit was a thing of beauty. I couldn't help but sigh as my eyes followed them out of the reception room. How could anyone not be nervous in their presence? Well, in any case, I suppose it's a good thing that I've been welcomed into their household. Perhaps it was more difficult for me to leave a good impression, as opposed to, say, a normal person. This villainous face of mine was to blame. Any attempts to smile elegantly may become a villainous, or even an evil smile instead. The possibility of such a thing happening was high. In fact, that was exactly what happened during that tea party at the castle when those children all scattered as I descended from the tree. One look was all it took. What a sad memory. Once the Askert couple were out of earshot, I leaned in, whispering to Keith. What beautiful, gentle parents Sophia has. It is as you say, big sister, Keith agreed, smiling as he did so. If only mother were like Madame Askert. She should be a little calmer, don't you think? All that frowning and getting mad does no favors for her appearance. Big sister. I, too, think that mother would very much like to live peacefully, Keith said, looking at me with a strangely sad gaze as I complained about how our mother was not at all like the kind and beautiful Madame Askert. What does he mean? I stared at Keith, a blank look at my face. My brother, however, merely sighed in response. At that very moment, Sophia entered the room. Following close behind her was Nicole, as expected. Sophia's breaths were somewhat irregular, and her cheeks were flushed with a slight tinge of red. On the other hand, Nicole, who had probably traveled at the same speed, hardly seemed winded at all. Welcome, Lady Katarina, Sophia said, with her flushed cheeks and slight smile. Ah, Sophia. Cute as always. As usual, I had a lot of fun talking with Sophia, as well as looking through the Askert family's study with its amazing collection of books and tomes. Amongst them were many stories that Sophia had read. It was truly a delight for me to go through them. Things were different, however, due to the fact that Keith's presence meant that Nicole was not as isolated as he was before. Now presented with a boy around his age, even the infamously silent Nicole would have a few things to say. While they were not as vocal as Sophia and me, a few glimpses revealed that they did have some conversation amongst themselves. Enjoyable time passes all but too quickly. Although my academic and etiquette lessons felt like an eternity, the time I spent with Sophia seemed to pass in an instant, as if time itself had sped up. While there were still many things I had wanted to do, staying too late would infuriate Mother, who had instructed me to not inconvenience my hosts. Hugging books that I had borrowed from Sophia close to my chest, Keith and I packed up, getting ready for the journey home. It happened as we were about to say farewell to the Askert siblings. "Oh no! I left the book I'd recommended to you in my room, Katerina," Sophia exclaimed, a little more shocked than she should be. "Ah, that book we were talking about just now, right. It was, as Sophia said, the top book in her recommendations list." She had spoken of it passionately in the study and perhaps in her passion had forgotten to take the book with her as she saw us off. "Yes, that book. I apologize, I will go fetch it right away." "It's quite all right, Sophia. Maybe I can borrow it next time." Sophia seemed ready to dash off back into the study at any moment. "No, it really is an amazing book. I do hope that you can read it as soon as possible." "Please, it will just be a moment." Saying so, Sophia turned, rushing off in the direction of the study. Noble ladies in dress did not do much in the way of running, of course, but she did set off at quite the pace. Seeing Sophia take off like that reminded me of a friend in my previous life, Akan. If Sophia had known me back then, we would surely have read manga together, watched anime, and maybe even played some Otome games. I have really great friends. As I saw Sophia off, Nicole, who had been silent up until now, suddenly turned to me. "Lady Katerina Clays. Allow me to thank you once again for being friends with Sophia. I am grateful from the bottom of my heart. Come to think of it, I did want to speak with Nicole today. That thought was all but forgotten as I lost myself in the Askert family's study, however. Buried amongst talk of books and novels with Sophia. But now this is a good chance. With this, I would be able to speak a little with Nicole. No, the pleasure is all mine. In fact, I am grateful that Lady Sophia would be friends with someone like me. Actually, your parents both said the same thing." "My parents?" It was then that I realized I had forgotten to tell Nicole and Sophia about our short meeting with their parents. "Yes, they took the trouble to personally show up at the reception room prior to your arrival. They are truly wonderful parents." "Is that so? Thank you, Lady Katerina," Nicole said expressionlessly. And with that, the conversation was over. While this was the longest conversation I had ever had with Nicole Askert, this was also hardly a conversation at all. What exactly did Keith say, for Nicole to have responded to him as much as he did? I would like some of Keith's conversational talent. Maybe just a little bit of it. Or is it because they're both boys? In any case, I have to see if the conversation can be revived. I need some sort of topic. Yes. Maybe this is it. This is the place to utilize all my knowledge from my past life. I'll show him all of my 17 years of wisdom. I'm not willing to lose to Keith any longer. Something to continue the conversation. I racked my mind and plumbed my memories. And then oh wait. What about that granny next door who would talk to me for 30 minutes or more whenever she caught me? That's it. That's the thing. That neighbor of mine was a conversational expert, with the power to prolong the most mundane of conversations. Now is the time to channel her power. Yes, in fact, there was that one phrase that she was so fond of using, over and over again. You really are blessed, Master Nicole, to have such amazing parents, and a cute younger sister. I followed up on my statement with a full-faced smile, just like that old lady had done. That granny would change up her phrase when faced with a different member of our family. For instance, she would tell my father what a lucky man he was, to have married such a beautiful bride. Once this phrase had been uttered, my father was as good as gone for the next 30 or so minutes. Yes. A complete reproduction of that talkative granny's words. However, blessed. For some reason, Nicole's demeanor suddenly changed completely. Do you truly think that I am blessed? Although Nicole's face was still as expressionless as ever, something about it was different. This sudden change in him scared me. No, it terrified me. I've really done it now, haven't I? I had somehow selected the wrong phrases, the wrong words. I do think that you have a wonderful family. Was I perhaps mistaken in any way? I stuttered, delivering my words slowly and apprehensively. Nicole stared into me with those black eyes of his. So intense was his gaze that I could feel holes boring through my being. Holes. And then... No. No, Lady Katarina. You are not mistaken at all. I have two respectable, wonderful parents, and a gentle, cute younger sister. Yes, I am truly blessed, Nicole said, as if pleased. And then he smiled. I had known Nicole for a few weeks now, but never once had I seen him smile. I had heard from Sophia that her brother did not, in fact, usually smile very much at all. But Nicole was now smiling. Smiling, like as if he were truly happy. Although he was already beautiful in his own right, that heartfelt smile on his face seemed to amplify that beauty several times over. It was as if the alluring Count himself, that very same one from the novel I liked, had appeared before me, bewitching smile and all. To think that Nicole was really the alluring Count all this time. Predictably, I clammed up, frozen solid. It was Sophia who freed me from the Count's curse, hugging the book that she had brought like it was some sort of treasure. Lady Katarina here. This book. I had finally broken free of the Count's spell, all thanks to the cute book hugging Sophia. Turning my head slightly, I saw Keith, who was also rooted to the spot. Nicole, on the other hand, had gone back to his usual emotionless self. This is bad. My lovable adoptive brother has been charmed by the alluring Count's power. Although I don't want Keith to fall in love with the protagonist, him falling for another boy is a little too dangerous. If this goes on, my treasured adoptive brother may go astray. After gratefully accepting the book from Sophia, I strategically positioned myself between Keith and Nicole all the way to the horse carriage. We waved our goodbyes and boarded, and soon left the Askert family home behind. And on the way back, to think that Nicole really was the alluring Count himself all this time. Will I be able to protect Keith from his clutches from here on out? To think that yet another rival would surface. Just how many temptations must she be showered with? Both Keith and I stared out of our respective windows, each muttering something inaudible to ourselves. I am the oldest son of the Count Askert's family, Nicole Askert. My father took me to the castle many times in my youth, owing to the fact that he was the royal chancellor. As a result, I had many opportunities to mingle with the princes of this kingdom, especially the two twin princes, who were a year younger than me. It was about a year prior when these two princes, whom I had known from childhood, began to change. Jedord, the third crown prince, and his incessantly perfect, fake smile. His eyes only spoke of boredom, nothing was reflected in them. Jedord, however, said that he had found something most interesting, and then, he smiled. It was a smile most dissimilar to the one he was fond of showing the world. And with time, Jedord changed, slowly but surely. His false smile slowly disappeared, and in its place was a sparkling vigor. And then there was Jedord's brother, the fourth crown prince, Alan. Alan often compared himself to Jedord and resisted him at every turn. His desperation seemed to only bring him pain. Even Alan, however, started to change with time. As if a great weight had been lifted off his shoulders, Alan stopped resisting Jedord. Instead, he started putting effort into furthering his musical talents, which was where his interests originally lay. His talent was formidable, and almost overnight, people were lauding him as a prodigy of music. However, the most marked change of all was the fact that Alan would now speak normally with Jedord, whom he used to despise. Those in the castle were surprised, bewildered even, by this. They found it strange that Alan's attitude towards Jedord, which had always been one of defiance and resistance, would change. In fact, the changes went beyond the two just speaking normally with each other. They even started leaving the castle grounds together. As of late, they had even been seen speaking cordially within the castle grounds. A truly theatrical change. The reason for this profound change remained a mystery to most, however. The rumors, when they eventually came, spoke of a place they were known to frequent, the Clays Manor, home to Duke Clays and his family. Something or someone was the reason why such a change had come over the two princes. It was a day after the tea party at the royal castle that we made our way to the rumored Clays Manor. My sister, who had attended this party with me, had apparently received a formal invitation from the eldest daughter of the Clays family, Lady Katerina Clays. My sister, Sophia Askert, is a gentle and lovable girl. A noble lady of good standing in her own right. Sophia does stand out, however, with her porcelain white hair and red eyes. And because of this fact, because Sophia was a little different, she was exposed to the cruel whims of society. They would look upon her strangely as she walked, and those jealous of our family's achievements claimed that she was a cursed child. Even more cruel were the foolish children who took those words literally. With their heartless gazes and words, these people hurt Sophia. She eventually cooped herself up in her room, no longer willing to face the world. For a few years, Sophia remained that way, closed to the outside world. Until the day where those two princes held a tea party at the royal castle, which we both attended. Sophia did not seem too enthusiastic about going, and neither was I. The two princes had met with Sophia several times before. I had no doubt that they would not cast discriminatory looks upon her, nor consider themselves above her. The party, however, was large in scale, as fitting of one held by the twin princes. The children, young lords and ladies of many noble families, would also be in attendance. There would surely be some amongst them who would shun and bemoan Sophia's presence, thinking themselves superior. I did not wish for Sophia to go to such a place, but my father convinced us otherwise. Both you and Sophia have magic within. At the age of 15, you will both have to attend the Academy of Magic. Remember that you and Sophia are different in both gender and age, so you will not be always able to stay by her side and protect her. Sophia has to learn how to protect herself. With that many children gathered, I am sure that she will even make some friends. We, the Askert siblings, did have magic in our veins, and all those who did had to enroll at the academy once they come of age, as per the laws of this land. In 4 years, I would do the same, and in another year, Sophia would have to follow suit. I wanted to stay by her side as long as possible. I wanted to protect my precious sister. However, given our differences in age and gender, there was no way I could always watch over her. Before Sophia had shut herself in, my parents did take her along on similar outings to make friends, they said. Children, however, were exceptionally sensitive to those who were different from themselves. In the end, all those efforts ended up hurting Sophia. I understood that this could not possibly go on. However, the prospect, the very thought of seeing Sophia cry once more was infinitely more terrifying to me. At the tea party, I was separated from my sister, despite my efforts. I was truly pathetic. How could I think of protecting Sophia like this? Many of those terrible noble children, the very same ones that had hurt Sophia before, were also present at this party. Surely they would hurt her again, now that I was separated from her. There was no doubt about it. With this thought in mind, I could hardly calm myself. And so I desperately searched for my sister, to no avail. It was only at the end of the party that I had finally found her. Sophia, however, was simply standing still with a blank expression on her face. "What have they done to you? Who was it?" I asked, worried. "Someone by the name of Lady Katarina Clays has invited me to visit her manor," Sophia muttered, that same expression still plastered across her features. And so the two of us headed to the rumored Clays manor. Honestly speaking, I wasn't too enthusiastic about this turn of events, if only because Sophia had received many similar invitations before, only for them to spurn her and turn her away at the gates. Worry clouded my mind. I had little choice but to approach Jedord, Katarina's fiancé, about Katarina herself. I referred to how she had been kind to Sophia at the party and had invited my sister to her manor. "You seem to have changed recently. A little more restrained. Were you simply playing with yet another noble lady?" For a while, Jedord muttered to himself, before finally looking up at me, with a seemingly all-knowing smile. "Nicole. I will admit, Katarina is strange. Different. She would not, however, hurt your most beloved sister." Trusting in Jedord's words, but yet still concerned for Sophia, I ended up following her to the Clays family manor. "I think that your silky white hair is beautiful. That your ruby red, sparkling eyes are beautiful. That you are beautiful," Katarina Clays said, smiling at Sophia as she did so. "Actually, I would be most pleased if you would come and visit again. And if you don't mind, would you like to be my friend?" Those were the girl's words. She was gently smiling as she held Sophia's hands in hers. It was as Jedord had said. There was no way this girl would hurt my precious sister. As I stared at Katarina's gentle smile, I finally noticed it. She was the one. She was the reason why those changes had come over Jedord and Alan. A unique atmosphere, a most mysterious girl. The twin princes visited this manor just to meet her. And just like those before her, Sophia changed after meeting Katarina Clays. Before, she had never wanted to take a single step outside her room. Now she clamored to be let out every single day. A light had illuminated her pained, dark features. A light from within and a smile had returned to her face. I was deeply, deeply grateful towards Katarina Clays. With Sophia's increasing amount of outings, however, came the whispered rumors and insults in the shadows. I was not about to stand by and see my now smiling sister return to her dark, lonely room. I applied the appropriate kinds of pressure on those who would dare speak ill of Sophia. I silenced the voices in the shadows. I suppose I had not been forceful enough before. I renewed my efforts, and with that, the whispers eventually faded. Even so, as these gossip mongers eventually disappeared. Master Nicole is most unfortunate, having to do all that just for that sister of his. Master Nicole is most capable, but those rumors. All because of his sister. What a pity. How very unfortunate. That Ascot boy to have so many things said about him behind his back. The condemnations, gossip, disdain, had all but ceased. In their place was pity. Empathy, perhaps? The harder I worked to protect Sophia, the louder the voices became. They were not hostile voices, not by any means. They merely pitied me for having to do all this. They spoke of how unfortunate I was. However, those words pierced my heart. Mercilessly. Thoroughly. I was not some victim to be pitied. My family was in no way unfortunate. I had 2 respectable parents, and a lovable and gentle sister. They were family I could be proud of. If anything, I thought that I was fortunate. But no one around me understood this. If I claimed to be fortunate, to be happy, they would assume that I was merely putting up with it. Tolerating it. This infuriated me. I was fortunate. I was blessed. And yet how could they? How could they simply decide that I was unfortunate, that I was to be pitied? Don't you dare think of my precious sister as a source of misfortune. I've been nothing but happy ever since Sophia was born. In time, I grew tired of these unwanted words, this unsolicited pity. I thought that it was no longer important, even if no one ever understood. My precious sister was now smiling, laughing. And that, to me, was enough. Even if bystanders pitied me, or thought of me as an unfortunate victim, even if they would never understand me. That, too, was fine. That would do. You really are blessed, Master Nicole, to have such amazing parents, and a cute younger sister. Katerina Clays, the girl in front of me, said with that same gentle smile on her face. It was that exact smile that she had shown to Sophia. A gentle, warm light. Blessed. Yes. Exactly. Just like I had always thought. But no one would understand me. No one sought to. Do you truly think that I am blessed? I said, staring straight at Katerina. I do think that you have a wonderful family. Was I perhaps mistaken in any way? And Katerina stared back, her aqua blue eyes looking into mine. No. No, Lady Katerina. You are not mistaken at all. I have 2 respectable, wonderful parents, and a gentle, cute younger sister. Yes, I am truly blessed. I had thought that no one would ever understand. I had already given up. Even so this girl Katerina. She understood. Ah! To think that I had assumed that I was alone, that no one would ever understand these thoughts of mine. The indignation in my heart slowly started to fade. I gazed upon the girl standing before me once more. The eldest daughter of Duke Clays, Katerina Clays. A mysterious girl who had changed those twin princes, and the first to understand these thoughts of mine, when I had already long given up on empathy and understanding. I finally understood why the princes and my sister were so eager to visit the Clays manor. Again and again, day after day. I suppose it was reasonable to assume that I would soon take after them, putting one foot in front of another on the way to the Clays manor. not just to escort Sophia and to keep her safe but to meet Katerina Claes.